Thank you. I would like to introduce members to Canon Ian Black, who will be saying prayer this evening. Please remain standing for prayers.
First of all, a prayer for our nation at this time. Prayer issued by the Church of England for the nation. God of hope, in these times of change, unite our nation and guide our leaders with your wisdom. Give us courage to overcome our fears and help us to build a future in which all may prosper and share. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. And let us hold this whole council before God, for each member and the wards which you represent. We pray for the decisions which lie ahead this evening. Pray for God's grace and wisdom to be with you all. Eternal light, shine into our hearts. Eternal goodness, deliver us from evil. Eternal power, be our support. Eternal wisdom, scatter the darkness of our ignorance. Eternal pity, have mercy upon us, that with all our heart and mind and soul and strength, we may seek your face and be brought by your infinite mercy to your holy presence. Amen.
Thank you. Please be seated. May I remind members of the public that they are here to observe the meeting in the interest of the safety for the members and officers. If there is a safety concern, then I will be forced to adjourn the meeting. In the event of the evacuation alarm sounding continuously, all persons should leave the building by the nearest exit and go to the assembly point in front of the cathedral. If the alarm is on and off, this means that there is a lockdown. Attendees should stay in their seat and wait further instruction. This meeting is also being live streamed. I therefore ask members to ensure they use their microphone when speaking. Please also make sure all devices are connected to the corporate Wi-Fi network. Information on this has been provided at your seats. Finally, when a member rises to speak, I ask that other members remain quiet and ensure that respect is shown to the members speaking. Agenda item 1, apology for absence. Are there any apology for absence?
Yes, we have received apologies from Councillor Ellis, Councillor Fowler and Councillor Lamb. Are there any other apologies? Councillor Fox. Okay. Any others? No. Thank you.
Item number 2, declaration of interest. Please note that the Audit Committee have granted a general dispensation for all the members should they have any pecuniary interest that enable them to debate and vote on the budget item later in the agenda tonight. Any members who is more than 2 months in arrear with council tax must declare this now, as this will affect your right to vote on the budget item. Are there any declaration of interest from members this evening which are not already recorded separately on their individual register of interest? Thank you. Agenda item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of October. The minutes of the special and ordinary full council meeting held on the 16th of October 2019 are shown on the pages 3 to 36 of the agenda book. I would like to move approval of these minutes. Do I have a seconder?
Pleasure to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Hedda.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to point out a typo, but I think a fairly significant typo on page 30 of our agenda books. It was in response, my response to a question from Councillor Ash, and it was the third line down, and it reads... Sorry?
We're not on that item on the agenda
Councillor
yet.
Murphy.
We're not on that item on the agenda yet, Mr. Mayor. We're dealing with the special council minutes.
Thank you.
You did actually give the page numbers, Mr. Mayor, that included page 30.
I think the Mayor was talking about dealing with them both at once, but if we deal with the first meeting first for clarity, are there any issues with the first set of minutes? No.
Councillor David Seaton.
Second set of minutes. Councillor Hiller, would you like to
Councillor Hill, please.
continue, please?
This is the second set of minutes, yes? Yes? Fine. It's just that you did
Sorry,
say, I
just
think
for
you said up to page
clarification,
36.
Are we agreeing them separately? Because there were two different meetings. I was at one and I wasn't at the other. I can move and second for one and I can't for the other.
I'll second the other
So
one.
deal with them.
if the Mayor moves the minutes of the special meeting and then Councillor Holditch seconds it, I think they were both there, then we vote on that before we go to the next item. Twice we've jumped to the next item because this Egypt wants to get up and say something.
Can you just tell Councillor Murphy that's not appropriate language, please?
Councillor Murphy, that's another appropriate language, please. Thank you. Councillor Peter Hedda, please.
Do you know, I really don't think it's worth bothering. I mean, if I'm legitimately standing up to correct the minutes of a previous meeting and I'm called an idiot, then I just really feel it's just not worth bothering, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor David Seaton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You'll remember that during this meeting, motion 4 from Councillor Sandford about the transport plan, I made the point that the Liberal Democrats want park and ride and want to pay for that by increasing parking charges, at which point Councillor Wigan got up and denied it, and then got up again a second time and denied any increase in parking charges. I just want to go back to the 20...
Councillor Seaton, is there an inaccuracy in the minutes?
Well,
if so,
it's
could you
not
please
in the
point
minutes.
us to the minutes?
I would like
that's
the
inaccurate.
legal officer's guidance on this, because it's not in the minutes. I have here the Liberal Democrat manifesto for 2019.
Councillor Seaton, I don't think that is an issue with accuracy of the minutes.
May I make a point of order?
Sorry, are we going to go on like this all night, legal officer? That anyone gets up to make a point will not be heard. This is a
Point
farce.
of order, Mr. Mayor. Point of order.
Can you please, Councillor Seaton, sit down, please?
Right. My point of order is that it is not normal for the minutes to record every single thing that was said at the council meeting. So if Councillor Seaton wants to challenge them, he has to challenge the accuracy of what is actually in the minutes. It's not open to him to argue that the other things that aren't in the minutes ought to have been there.
That's exactly what I'm doing, legal officer. I am challenging that exchange is not in the minutes. The minutes are therefore not accurate. Yet I have here the Lib Dem manifesto from May, which
there
I
are lots of
appreciate
things that are not in the
Councillor
minutes that
Sandford
were
does
said in
not
Councillor
want to
Seaton,
hear.
the fact that something is not in the minutes does not make the minutes inaccurate. The minutes are not supposed to be a verbatim report of the meeting.
So if the minutes didn't include anything, that would be acceptable,
Yes.
because they wouldn't be a verbatim report of the meeting.
Yes.
That's a nonsense.
Well-
Ridiculous ruling.
Item number 3, yeah.
No. Councillor, find out what this...
Councillor, what's the name? Councillor Joseph, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the minutes, it refers to Mrs. Saltmarsh as a he. So if it could be referred to as a she, it would be better, obviously, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Seaton.
Yes, can I just have guidance, Mr Mayor? If it is a significant point, and surely a councillor in this chamber denying point blank information which they stood on at the May election is a significant point, why can I not raise that as an omission from the minutes and something that needs changing?
Seaton is standing because he said there was an inaccuracy with the minutes. It doesn't need to be a point of order, and we're on minutes at the moment, that's why. Councillor Seaton, I would kind of repeat what Councillor Sandford said, that the minutes are not intended to be a verbatim record. If what is written here is inaccurate, then that's for you to change now. If something's been left out and you don't feel that the minutes accurately capture the sense of the item, that's a different matter. But it would have been helpful to have that before the meeting so the Democratic Services could check that against their notes.
Thank you, Legal Officer. I have only just printed this off and was reading it just at the start of the meeting, which is why I hadn't raised it previously. So I would like to raise that there was that significant error in the recording, that it's not captured in the meeting minutes, which is that a councillor in this chamber denied two things that were in their manifesto in May. Thank you.
So, Councillor Seaton, are you suggesting that particular words are added into the minutes? If so, please would you suggest those?
I'm very happy to discuss it after the meeting and ensure it's corrected.
Unfortunately, the meeting has to decide on it now.
OK, I'm very happy to give you words. During the motion 4, I made the point that the Liberal Democrats wish to introduce park and ride in this city and wish to pay for that by increasing parking charges. Councillor Wiggin rose, firstly, to deny that, and then to deny there was no plan to increase parking charges. However, the Liberal Democrat manifesto from May says a top priority of the Liberal Democrats is park and ride bus services. And it then says on the following page, we will finance these by raising city centre car parking charges. Now, I think it's a really serious issue that in that meeting, a councillor misled the chamber to such an extent. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Seaton. Item 3.
You said that at the time. That's what you're asking to be captured. Sorry, David. It's not what you're saying now. You said that at the time. No, that's not.
Yeah, I didn't say the manifesto.
Okay.
Councillor Seaton, are there any particular words that you want to insert into the minutes that aren't there at the moment?
Sorry, Al.
Precise words, please.
Precise words.
And where do you want them going?
Yes. I made the point to Council that the Liberal Democrats, and I hope someone's taking this down because it's the third time I've said it, the Liberal Democrats want to introduce park and ride into the city and pay for that by increased car parking charges. And I made that point, and Councillor Wiggin denied the whole point and then denied
Point of order, Mr Mayor. I didn't
the parking charge
I thought
point.
this was about the accuracy of the minutes. We're not. If Councillor Seaton wants to debate what's in the Liberal Democrat Action Manifesto, we're having a meeting about it on Friday, and if he wants to give me some ideas, I'm quite happy to put them forward.
Sorry, Councillors. Call Councillor Murphy. Call Councillor Murphy.
Can I move next business, please? He can't remember what he said. He doesn't know what he wants inserting. Can we move next business and get on with the budget?
I've made the point 3 times.
Councillor
No one
Seaton,
has
you
written
have
it
suggested
down.
the addition of some wording into the minutes. Have you got you proposing that? Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Holditch is seconding. Right, we do need to take a vote on whether to amend the minutes in the way that Councillor Seaton has set out. He has read them out. Have you got a note of them? Pippa?
Yeah.
So the wording that I have down is to insert that I made the point Liberal Democrats wanted to introduce a park and ride into the city and pay for this by increasing car parking charges. Councillor Wiggin then denied this.
So can we take a vote on that, please, Pippa?
Okay, members, so we're now moving to the vote on whether to accept Councillor Seaton's changes to the minutes. To vote in favour of the changes to the minutes, you will need to press the green plus button. To vote against, you will need to press the red minus button. And to abstain, you will need to press the yellow 0 button.
But just for clarification, that's probably killed the voting system, sorry. If it transpires that these words that we've just been given, that the Secretariat managed to get down in a little sentence, are completely wrong, does it have to come back here at the next meeting and we challenge the minutes again? Can we just say, outside this meeting, can he check his words and make sure they tally with what actually happened?
No,
I don't,
you have
I don't
to
know how
just-
he can remember.
Councillor Murphy, the minutes need to be agreed tonight, and that's going to be done by a vote now. Councillor Seaton had proposed, and it's been seconded, that there's an addition in relation to the accuracy of the minutes, and that's what we're going to vote on.
Okay, I think we've got a problem because folk don't actually believe a word he says, so how can we vote on what he says he thinks he said?
Councillor Murphy, that's enough.
Just said no.
I can't, you need to.
Councillor Murphy, that's enough now. You
Mr
better
Mayor,
take
did
a
he
seat.
just
Yeah.
say that he didn't
Thank
believe
you.
a word he says? I mean, that's detrimental.
The mayor's just
Eh?
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you.
You asked for people not to talk when others were talking. You know, that's disgusting.
Can we move on? Can we go for...
Members, can we go back to operating correct standing orders here? If you wish to speak, please stand and say what you are speaking on. You've got a card in front of you that tells you what to do. If it's a point of order, you need to say what standing order you're querying, etc. Otherwise, we're going to have a very long evening.
Thank you. Take the vote.
Okay, members, will now move to the vote. We'll start the vote now. Okay, you should be ready to go.
Really voting on it. I ain't playing politics. No, I'm not really playing politics.
Speak the next.
No, just wait till the end of it.
What? Oh, now what I've done. Oh, no, what I've done. Have I blown it?
Okay, members, we have 2 members that still have not voted, so if you could do so in the next few seconds.
Okay.
Okay, so we have 27 voting in favour, 23 voting against and 5 abstentions. So that is carried.
Thank you.
Okay, members, we will now, because as we've taken the minutes separately, we'll now vote on the special meeting minutes. Okay, so all those in favour, again, it's green. All those against, it's red. And all those abstaining, it's yellow. So now open the vote on the special minutes.
What are we voting?
Okay, we still have 4 members that have yet to vote, so we'll leave the vote open for a few more seconds. Okay, so we'll now close the vote. Okay, members, so that's 51 voting in favour or to approve the minutes, 0 voting against and 1 abstention. Thank you. So the minutes are carried.
So which item? Yeah. Thank you, members. We are moving to agenda item 4, Mayor announcement. Over the next few months, I will be holding a number of events that I would welcome members to attend. These are in afternoon tea in the Mayor's Parlour on the 3rd of March, quiz night on the 6th of March, and curry night on the 10th of March. All members welcome to attend.
We haven't agreed the minutes, have we?
We have
It's taken a vote on the minutes, Councillor Murphy. Both sets of minutes. No, we've taken a vote on both of them.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, moving on. Agenda item 5.
Agenda item 5, leaders' announcement. I understand there are no announcements from the leaders this evening. Agenda item 6, petitions. May I remind you that in accordance with the Council rules of procedure, anyone presenting a petition will have 1 minute to outline the aim of the petition. Are there any petitions this evening from the public?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, members. I have pleasure in delivering this petition, signed by over 400 residents of Stanground, mainly those living in close proximity to Tenter Hill, requesting that the Council reverse the biodiversity descriptor for Tenter Hill and return to managing the area on a regular basis. This will allow its use for many purposes, especially leisure and recreation for local residents and children, which is currently not possible during the summer months. I will just add that this does not mean that the whole site needs to be mown short, and there is plenty of space to allow for a core area on the embankment to be left wild, with mown areas top and bottom, and paths and fire breaks mown into the side and the centre. It can be an area that gives something to everyone in the local area if it's done well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Agenda item 7. Cabinet recommendation, medium-term financial strategy, 2020-21, 2020. Sorry.
Are there any petitions from members? Are there any, to start there, are there any petitions from members?
Are there any petition from the members? No. Thank you.
No, we can move on.
Item 7 is the relation to the Cabinet recommendation on the medium-term financial strategy 2020-21, 22, 23, and can be seen on pages 37 to 74 of the agenda book, as well as in your budget books. Further information is also set out in the additional information pack. In line with standing orders, there will be no time limit on the speeches for this item. I will hand over to the Democrat and Constitutional Service Manager to run through the new debate procedure before we begin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Evening, councillors. So as we will be using the new amendment debate process for the first time this evening, I'm just going to run through this now to make sure everyone's clear in the process. As usual, the mover of the recommendation will be invited to speak by the Mayor and a seconder will be sought. Following this, Councillor Sanford will be invited to move his first amendment, which will be seconded. The second amendment will then also be moved and seconded. Once all the relevant recommendations and amendments are moved, Council will start its debate. All councillors will have an opportunity to speak once in the debate, which will cover the original recommendation and both amendments. When all councillors who wish to speak have, the Mayor will then invite the seconders of the amendments to speak if they have not already done so. The seconder of the original recommendation may then speak. The mover of the original recommendation will then have an opportunity to respond to the amendments and to sum up. Votes will then be held for the amendments and the recommendation in the reverse order to which they were moved. Amendment 2 will be voted on first, then Amendment 1, and then either the original recommendation or the recommendation as amended. I hope that's clear. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, could I just ask for one point of clarification? Maybe to save a bit of time, would it be helpful if I move both of the amendments at the same time, or would you want me to move them separately?
Can I just...
I think it would be easier if they were moved together, but we'll take separate votes on them. Yeah. Councillor Fitzgerald.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Just for clarification, so if a member rises to speak, they have an allotted time, but do they have to speak about both amendments in the time that they speak, or speak separately? Just
There's
once.
no time limit on this
but just speak
debate
once.
because it's about the budget, but you only get to speak once.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah.
Ask David Seaton. Yeah?
Yes.
David Seaton, yeah?
Yes.
Councillor David Seaton, would you like to move the recommendation?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Pippa, for that explanation as to how things will work. Peterborough, in common with most other councils, faces a severe financial challenge. Government grant is reducing to help address the national deficit and debt. At the same time, the demand for our services is increasing significantly. There's inevitably a financial gap left to fill. We can have a philosophical debate about the role of local government. Is it just about statutory duties, or does it play a much broader role in society? Whatever your views on that, we have a duty as councillors to pass a balanced budget. Let us be clear, the earlier we get on with the changes planned, the better. Waiting until March will just make our task much more difficult. It's good to pause, though, and remind ourselves that we can take pride in two factors that mark this council out as different. Firstly, we've been successful in avoiding the cuts that many other councils have made, and in many cases we have improved services. For example, we will talk tonight about youth services, one of the first areas cut by others. We're still spending over £1 million a year on ours. Our libraries all remain open with longer hours thanks to our investment in innovative technology. We've kept all but one of our community centres open, where nationally more than 500 centres have been closed by other councils, and I know the Lib Dem leader is working hard on addressing that one glaring omission in his ward. We've kept children safe, recognised by our good Ofsted rating, and secured government funding for our Family Safeguarding Initiative, which seeks to deal with issues in the child's whole family, thus reducing the number coming into care. We're top performers for getting people out of hospital and back living safely at home. We've updated 25,000 streetlights to LED bulbs, saving £10 million, helping meet our carbon footprint commitment and reducing light pollution. We're one of the first cities with full fibre broadband, and we have a university within sight. The second reason to be proud is the willingness of our voluntary sector partners to work with us. They've not only understood our challenges, but have stepped up to help us in true collaboration. That only happens when trust and respect exists. And just a few examples are Kingsgate, who are to continue providing food banks and the Care Zone service without any funding from the council. Age UK, who have agreed to a reduction in cost for some specific services in return for a more consolidated approach to our remaining funding arrangements with them. And Vivacity, who are working even more collaboratively with us to continue to improve the cultural life of the city, but in a way that reduces reliance on council funding. I accept not all agree, as with the feedback from the Rainbow Credit Union. But with their number of customers dropping steeply, it's clear the basic bank accounts now available are filling the previous gap. The council cannot fund duplicate services. So we've been successful in avoiding cuts and successful in working with our partners. We've also been successful in our financial management. One of the lowest council tax levels in the country, so less for residents to pay. We generate a very high level of commercial income for a council our size, £70 million, so less for residents to pay. Our unit costs are significantly lower than the majority of councils, so less for residents to pay. We have strong financial management, as confirmed by our auditors, the only council in the county to have its accounts signed off on time, a real testament to our finance team, high quality and timely input, and close working with auditors. When we look to closing our financial gap, we always seek first to make our assets work harder for us, increase income through commercialisation, keep a tight grip on procurement to make sure every contract represents good value for money, and increasingly use automation to make our corporate back office more efficient and effective. This takes me on to busting some of the myths and misinformation I've heard about these proposals. We are not reducing services for the most vulnerable adults in our community, but we are undertaking a review of care packages to make sure that we're focusing resources and help on those who most need it. We are changing the way that youth services are provided. And whilst it's true we have less money to spend in this area, we continue to focus what we have on those young people most at risk. In addition to this, we're working hard with communities to support them to develop more general opportunities for young people across the city, which are far more tailored to local needs. We are reshaping our corporate and transactional functions in line with our changing council. Having made investments in systems, processes and people, we are now able to take the next step by making further efficiencies, maximising the opportunities provided by new technology. Finally, I want to say a big thank you and pay tribute to staff from across the council, without whom we could not run the excellent services we do, and who have contributed their ideas and expertise to bring forward the proposals you're considering tonight. So, Mr Mayor, I commend this report to you, or rather, as the Prime Minister would say, let's get the budget done. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Hear, hear.
Thank you, Councillor Seaton. Councillor Holdridge, will you second the recommendation and either speak now or reserve your right to speak later in the debate?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Happy to second and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Sandford, I understand you would like to move to two amendments to this recommendation. These amendments can be found in the additional, both your information pack. Please, could you now move amendments? Both your amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I will move Amendment 1 and Amendment 2. I believe these are sensible amendments which actually take out a couple of the most harmful features of the budget that the Cabinet is putting forward, and ask for them to be thought about again. But I'll talk first of all about Amendment 2, then I'll talk about Amendment 1, and then I'll just make some general remarks on the budget. What Amendment 2 is proposing, actually, is that we take the whole controversial issue of members' car parking permits and give it over to the members' allowances panel. The Council has declared a climate emergency and said it wants to get get Peterborough to zero carbon by 2030. Travel, we know, accounts for 20% of carbon emissions, so tackling climate change means a shift towards more sustainable transport, and it's important that the Council and councillors must put an example forward. But we also want to see, of course, a system which is fair to all councillors and enables them to fulfil the functions that they need to fulfil. Now, the Liberal Democrat group has always argued that we have an independent members' alliances panel. On issues such as these, we've all got our own opinions. We should go to the panel and put those opinions forward. But we've always argued that those recommendations that the panel makes should be mandatory on councils. And indeed, we put a motion to Peterborough Council, and a couple of years ago, we've voted through that as a principle. So a logical consequence of that is when we get issues like this, we should put them to the panel, and we should broadly accept what they say. Now, around about 10 years ago, the Members' Allowances panel recommended that all the council travel benefits that were in force at that time be taken out, and instead of that, councillors should be given a flat rate sum. Full council accepted that view, but decided to keep the free, at that time, parking permit for councillors. Now, a few years later, that was put up to £44, and in the original budget proposals the Cabinet put forward, they said they wanted to put it up to £110. But I have to point out to you that I actually asked, what would it cost if a member of the public were to get the same privileges that a councillor gets from their car parking permit? And I was told the approximate cost would be around about, not £44, not £100, but around about £800. So at a time of climate emergency, we're subsidising councillor car travel to the tune of around about £800 per councillor per annum. That doesn't seem a very green or a very sensible way forward. So what this amendment is doing is saying, put that case, and people can go and argue their case to the Members' Allowances panel, but they are the people who should be asked to adjudicate on it. So turning now to the first amendment, that on services to young people and the Citizens Advice Bureau. Now, what we're proposing here, because we're only at the first page of the budget, we're saying that we consider these are damaging proposals, and I'm just going to say in a minute why they are damaging proposals, and they should go back for further consideration so that we can have more information, and when we can then, when we get to debating the final council budget, we can decide what needs to happen. Now, on the services for young people, Councillor Seaton said that we currently spend around about £1 million. Now, can I point out to you that what these proposals do is they cut 500,000, so they're cutting 50% of the budget. Now, if that's not a cut, if that's not a severe cut, I don't know what is. Now, we as local ward councillors actually carry out surveys when we ask members of the public what they think about council services. And do they tell us that youth services need to be cut? No. What they say to us, and I can show you ream after ream of survey forms that show this, facilities for young people in their areas, people say, are not sufficient. And we actually know that there's actual evidence that if young people are short of things to do, there's an increase in levels of antisocial behaviour. So I think there's a danger that if this proposal goes through, rather than saving a lot of money for the council, it's going to lead to increased antisocial behaviour, increased crime, and it's going to lead to greater expenditure, not just for the council, but for social services and for other council partners like the police. So I think this proposal needs to be rethought. I also want to talk about the Citizens Advice Bureau. Now, we're told this won't be a problem to actually cut their budget because they'll then be able to target their resources onto people that are most in need, and people will be encouraged to go online to find information. Now, I actually know, because I spoke to somebody only a couple of days ago who is actually, their partner actually works for Citizens Advice Bureau and is being made redundant, and they were quite clear that that is a consequence of the cuts that this council is proposing. So it is a real cut that is having an impact on that service. Now, I was only listening to Radio 4 this morning, and I heard that 15% of adults in the UK do not have any savings at all. Levels of money that people actually owe through credit cards and a number of other means are at an all-time high. People find dealing with the increasing complexity of financial transactions really hard. And also, if you're encouraging people to go on computers and go online, there's an increasing number of online criminals who are trying to rip people off. So at a time when people most need a helping hand, particularly in services to do with personal finance, we are withdrawing that helping hand. We're making it harder for them, and I don't think that is something that is a sensible proposal. So those are the two amendments that we're putting forward. But I'd just like to make a couple of general points about the budget. You can look through these budget proposals and you won't find anywhere the words climate emergency. But this council has declared a climate emergency and said they want to make ambitious cuts. They want to get to zero carbon by 2030. Now, saving the planet needn't always mean increased expenditure, but it does mean refocusing expenditure onto the most important things that are going to help reduce carbon emissions, not increase them. And I have to say to you that the indicators that we have show that we're not going in the right direction, we're going in the wrong direction. Look at recycling. Our policy says we should have 60% of our waste recycled by 2020. But in January 2020, we're now recycling only 40%, and that figure is falling. We all know we need to encourage more use of sustainable transport, but we've closed the bus information kiosk. We've closed the tourist information centre. And Department for Transport statistics show that bus usage in Peterborough has fallen by 20% over a 4-year period. This is not good news as regards the climate. Now, finally, I want to say something about the cross-party budget group. I actually think that working cross-party through task and finish groups is something this council does particularly well. We've always advocated cross-party working, but I have to say that what we've seen at the budget working group is we increasingly get presented with long lists of proposals that the Cabinet has already decided on. Meetings are often held at too late a point in the process to actually influence what's going to happen. And at a recent meeting, we actually had a 40-page document was handed out at the meeting, and members didn't have time to go through it. And the Conservatives on the group are always obsessed with keeping any information secret and preventing us from talking about it to our colleagues. So I have to say to you that the Liberal Democrat group...
I just make a point of accuracy, Mr Mayor. Councillor Sanford has just talked about Conservative members on the budget working group being obsessed with secrecy. Councillor Sanford will know full well that that group has agreed that if a representative on it feels they want to discuss an issue outside of that group, they can ask the group and we will discuss it. We're not closed to that information being discussed more widely. We just want to ensure we understand where information that, for example, could affect the jobs of our staff is not shared more widely before it should be. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, David.
Just say it, just say it.
Councillor Walsh.
I think if you just speak as loudly as you can while we're getting the microphones fixed, please. No, probably best not. Yes, we do need to do that. We need to get the seconder for the amendment first.
Second.
So we need to do Wigan. We need to do that first.
Can
Just
do
this
this
bit
now.
here, Councillor Wigan,
Yeah.
in a big loud voice. Councillor Walsh, would you mind sitting down for one moment? We need to get it seconded. Yes, please.
Councillor Wigan, would you like to second both the amendments and either speak now or reserve your right to speak later in the debate? Councillor Wigan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I'm happy to... It's flashing at me. I'm happy to second both amendments, and I reserve.
Thank you. Councillor Walsh, you want to come back?
PCC are still proposing to retain £150,000 of investment into general information, advice and guidance. Citizens Advice Bureau have been reviewing their operating model for some time and have very successfully transitioned clients to self-serve options, including online and centralised telephone support. Yay. Covering a wide range of issues, including housing, employment, skills and leisure. The Council itself can provide appropriate advice on key issues such as welfare benefits, adult social care payments, housing and homelessness. Our Think Communities work, which will deliver a focused, place-based approach to supporting and working with communities, will seek to identify gaps in provision, especially where it is specific to a neighbourhood, and to work with partners, local organisations and citizens to find ways to fill those gaps. As is the case with other councils, we recognise that in many cases the outcome of a CAB intervention is to refer the client to the council. Whilst in itself this is not a bad outcome, we believe it would be far more helpful for people to come directly to the council by default and not through a third party. Turning to the TIS, the Targeted Youth Support Services, the council currently provides £1.7 million worth of youth service, not the figure quoted by yourself, Councillor Sandford.
To personal explanation, Mr Mayor, it wasn't me that quoted that figure, it was Councillor Seaton in actually putting the budget for.
Okay, well, we'll get that clarified, but this is the figure that has been given to me by our officers, that we currently provide £1.7 million worth of youth services, including targeted youth work, the Youth Offending Service and community-based youth provision. In 2018, we merged several separate youth services and teams into the now Targeted Youth Support Service. At the time, no savings were identified or made. Instead, we focused on creating and establishing the new service and agreeing service standards, which I think we have done very well. The service has operated well, but it has become clear that there is scope to make some efficiencies in the face of extreme financial pressure without adversely impacting on service standards. The proposed reduction of 500k is achieved by reducing resources across the TIS in aspects of the service which provide discretionary provision, and it's important to emphasise that. However, it remains an absolute priority to support young people and their families who are vulnerable or at risk of becoming so. For example, young people involved in crime, in care or on the edge of care, or young people in communities that are in themselves vulnerable. I must emphasise that our statutory youth offending duties are unaffected by these proposals. Whilst there will be less one-to-one work with some young people and our ability to directly deliver open access youth provision will be minimised, we will be retaining a centre of excellence of expertise who will be available to work with community and faith groups or parish councils who are interested in setting up their own youth club provision. We will be able to provide expert knowledge and template policy and procedural documents that will make it far easier for alternative provision to be developed. We will also be retaining significant expertise to be able to secure some of the significant national funding being made by the government for youth services. And as was mentioned in the documents, the NCS service will be kept. 300 young people accessed it this year. There is already a wide range of non-council run youth provision available in Peterborough. We will ensure that this is more widely publicised and that young people can be more easily directed towards it. For example, a number of faith groups provide open access youth clubs. We've got the PCVS, the Goldhay Centre, providing youth inspired. Kingsgate deliver targeted youth support, and Romsey Mill are very active, particularly in the south of the city. So there is, in fact, a lot going on, and perhaps our young people would benefit from knowing what is actually out there. So in conclusion, Mr Mayor, I believe that together with our officers, we have done a very competent job of both contributing to the need to deal with budget pressures, but in a way that will have the least possible impact on these two service areas. And finally, I see no reason to delay our decision-making on this. The clock is ticking and we must make bold decisions today and deal with the financial challenges we face. There can be no benefit in delaying such decisions, particularly in light of no credible alternative being put forward to make the necessary savings. And then finally, please accept my full assurance that I and my colleagues, together with officers, will keep a very close watch on these service areas, and we will ensure that we maintain our very high standards of support. Thank you.
Just a very quick point, Mr Mayor. The budget for youth services will be £1.2 million after this reduction. So it will continue to be £1.2 million. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you.
Just waiting for more speakers.
Thanks. Councillor Ash, next.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Before I begin, I just want to seek a little clarification from the legal officer, because I am, in fact, a trustee of the Citizens Advice Bureau. And I gather with dispensation, I shall be all right to speak in favour. Yes, thank you. I shall therefore, from that, you'll understand that I shall naturally support Councillor Sanford's amendment. I just want to say that the proposals to cut funding to the CAB will mean that there will need to be significant cuts in the service that they provide. Now, those cuts will naturally affect the people in most need. It will have to move away from a drop-in service, which a lot of people do rely on. And so many people, probably as you know from ward work, do leave issues till the very last minute when they do need a lot of hands-on assistance. So I think if we cut the amount significantly, which is in the proposals, that will adversely affect many citizens of Peterborough. And I think that will mean probably a knock-on effect to the council services, because people will probably need to rely on lots of other things and extra assistance from other sources. So I do ask that part of it is reconsidered, and I give it every support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ash. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Shaz Nawaz, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I can just ask clarification from Fiona. Do we just speak on the amendment now, or do we speak on the entire budget, just so I'm clear? I've tried, yeah.
You're speaking on the amendment and the motion at the same time. This is the new procedure, so you can speak for as long as you like, but you have to make all your comments at the same time.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I speak to Councillor Sanford's second amendment, which relates to the issue of members' allowances and also to parking permits. I can always depend upon Councillor Sanford to be very keen on the climate emergency and on trying to speak very lucidly on the issues of environmental concerns that we live under now. And I applaud him on every meeting being able to get at least some mention about trees and buses in. In fact, I'm very disappointed when he doesn't do it. There's only been one occasion since I've been in the chamber that he's been unable to answer on both those questions. So I'm always keen to hear what he has to say about environmentalism. I am, however, very concerned about this amendment. I don't think it fits at all within the budget. And the reason why I say this is I was trying to work out the figures that he was quoting in terms of the costs of this allowance of £44 for members to be able to park their cars on controlled spaces within the city. So let's be fair about this and say, well, maybe we're going to use it 50 times when we come to council meetings. Maybe in the centre of town we sometimes come on council business and we have to park either in a council car park or maybe on residential parking spaces. So if we were to do that, the cost overall would be roughly £6,300. And the costs currently for the allowances that are paid in terms of the £44 per annum is £2,640. So why on earth are we bringing this issue up into the budget when we've got significant sums to save? My second point would be, I absolutely applaud the idea about trying to find better ways of travelling so that we make sure that we do show some leadership in terms of the climate emergency issues. For example, I'm very lucky because I can car share since I live with my fellow councillor. I'm sure there are others who are also able to car share. My fellow councillor on her own will use a bicycle, but that's an extremely green form of travel. When I travel outside of the city, of course, we already have allowances per mile. I never claim them. When I do travel, I use a motorbike, which is 1/6 the impact on carbon of a motor vehicle. Now, I'm not entirely sure that taking these issues to a subcommittee to come up with some mandated principles about how a group of adults who are perfectly capable of coming up to sensible decisions about how they're going to reduce their carbon footprint, there's anything other than to be somewhat, dare I say it, illiberal. The best answer, surely, is to use our policy forum when we all come together to discuss how we best educate ourselves on ideal ways to travel so that we do reduce our carbon footprint. I think it's a complete waste of time to cover these sort of issues in this important debate that we're having about how we can sustain activities going forward.
Point of personal explanation, Mr. Mayor. He's saying, why did I include this? I put this amendment forward because in the original Cabinet proposals, there was a proposal on permits for council parking. So that's the reason I've actually put this forward. And the reason I propose it should go to the Members' Allowances panel is that Council has passed a resolution saying that these issues should be decided by the Members' Allowances panel.
Councillor Cole, you want to come back?
I'm very grateful for the clarification. I think it was last July when that... 4 July, very good. I completely understand his position. I just think this is the wrong forum to cover it. We have, I think, Councillor Day, you're involved in the Climate Working Group, for example. Now, that would be an ideal opportunity to talk about what options exist in terms of councillors travelling. Let's be honest about it. All councillors are not employed by the council. The allowance we get covers everything. It covers the material that we produce for our residents, it covers our travel, it covers all sorts of expenses that you get as a councillor. We don't get pensions, we don't get other allowances. I think this is a very parsimonious and somewhat overbearing way of dealing with what is a very sensitive and sensible question about how we reduce our carbon footprint as individual councillors. And I would please ask members to reject this as part of the budget because it's completely inappropriate. Let's deal with it as sensible adults and deal with it outside of this process. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Councillor Murphy next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to talk about the general budget, the tranche 1 cuts that are here before us tonight. It's rather late. We're now in the fourth quarter of this year. I think there was some expectation and hope that we could have brought something in earlier on to readjust the budget. On the amendment, in support of the first amendments on the youth service and CAB, that is very, very worrying. Whether it's a third cut or a 50% cut in the youth service, it is very worrying. Even the police commissioner's response to the budget is suggesting that we need to be careful on what we do on youth services. Others will speak on that. On the third amendment, it's not unexpected. So far, we've talked quite a lot about councillors' allowances. We've not talked about the lifeline charge coming in. We've not talked about the cuts that are going to affect very many elderly and vulnerable people in Peterborough so far. Cuts that I can't support. There must be another way. We were told that there were going to be savings from the new way we worked with the county. We were told that computers were going to do things for us, but we made a mistake on that. I think it was £4.5 million mistake, plus other things that IT procured externally that we didn't need. We made mistakes early on. I remember a few years ago we made a mistake over the solar farms. The rural areas weren't going to have them. This council wasn't going to have them. We missed the feed-in tariff, I think, on Freeman's. I don't know about that. But we have made mistakes. Sometimes we learn from our mistakes, but sometimes we don't. And I think the cuts and the budget crisis we're in is particularly difficult because of those mistakes we've made. Paying, some would say, several million more than we needed to for St Michael's Gate. Had we bought it earlier on when it was suggested, we wouldn't have had to pay the rent as well. So all those millions add up. And, OK, we make mistakes. There's been no contrition, really, about those errors. And I accept some people do wrong things, but you should try and learn from them. I think the Rhubarb Bridge is one. I don't know how much that has cost. Some people say up to 5 million. We were told at one point the bridge had it, and I think it was going to cost 27 million to replace, and it couldn't be fixed. The public outed that one, and it became quite clear that it had another 10 years' life in it. But we were told we still needed the at-grade crossings. We weren't learning from our mistakes. I thought the officers wanted to try and get more road capacity, and that's what it was all about, not about putting people's lives at risk. The air quality down there will be very, very poor. I've said there should be some contrition about errors that have cost us. You get things wrong, it has consequences. But I really cannot, for the life of me, understand how you can be so negligent talking about Rhubarb Bridge, there was a report that said there would be several fatalities if we went ahead with that. And I don't know what councillors had seen that report, but certainly in all that furore from the public, the full council meeting on it, the petition, I only became aware about that report when I read it in the Peterborough Telegraph recently because of a Freedom of Information Act. Some people would say it's not negligence, it's not a mistake, it's verging on criminal not to disclose that information. We went ahead and spent £5 million on a junction when we knew, as a council, or somebody knew, that there would be several deaths within 4 years. Anyway, back to the amendments. The amendment on the car parking perk, councillors' allowances. To get free car parking in the car parks, the public would have to buy a season ticket at £899. To get parking in a residential area, I think it's £25. To park on the on-street parking that councillors' permits allow as well, I don't know what that would cost. I accept what some councillors say. Councillors don't use it every day. But I think if it does go to the independent committee to look at it, they may do some checking and see are councillors actually using their permits always when they're on council business. That could be verified. You can fill in the form. Now, at the Joint Scrutiny Committee meeting, we didn't go into depth on the lifeline cuts and some of the other cuts, but there was one thing that came clear out there. We wanted the budget to consider the climate emergency, because only a few months ago, at the beginning of this year's Municipal Council, we accepted that, I think, unanimously as a council, but there was nothing coming out of the Joint Scrutiny. I moved, and it was agreed, that we ask Cabinet to do a shuffle and have a look at it and see how it affects. Nothing has come out on that, and I think it's very, very important. I see the climate report that's come out recently about air quality. We're not looking at the incinerator. There are things there that we need to do. So, on the overall budget, I think it's worse. In other parts of the county, they're not going for the full 4%. In Cambridge, they're actually investing in homes for the homeless, investing in services to tackle poverty and deprivation. But that's exactly where we're cutting. On the Rainbow Saver, I would ask that somewhere we reflect on that. Again, other people may have something to say in a minute, but they've had to move because of the car park that apparently wasn't maintained and we had to demolish, and we're still waiting on an internal report. Well, maybe we could have phoned up the people that mended it 10, 12 years ago and asked them what their inspection said then, rather than just have 4 pages of pictures and a bit of narrative. So could we look and see whether we can help the Saver? Again, maybe look and see at bank accounts that you can get now and see whether it's necessary. But it would be great for it to be located near the DWP or near the town hall, where people would really benefit from its use, could be referred down from those offices. So I'd ask that that one's looked at in an intelligent way, outside the box if we can do, to see if we can help maybe with the rent if we're not going to give a grant. But don't cut the youth service at the moment. It's too early. Don't cut the CEAB at the moment. And on the amendment, I'm waiting to hear the arguments on the council perks, but £899 for a car park permit plus the on-street. Can we come up with something whereby councillors can go for business in their wards and elsewhere where they need to park? Can we have something sensible? And I think the original proposal to put it up from £40 to over £100 was probably a way to go. But really the only thing you've kicked back from those original budget papers as an administration were the perks. You don't want to give up your perks. There's far more important things than your car park permit. And actually, we shouldn't be promoting cars in a city when we're facing a climate emergency. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. We got other speakers coming now. Councillor Jamil next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I rise to support Councillor Sanford's amendment on the CAB and the youth service. Now, I know that CAB, what looks like at the moment, get quite a lot of money, but historically you've got to look at how they've got to that stage. Now, a few years ago, talking 10, maybe 12 years ago, there were lots of different agencies where the council would fund, Racial Equality Council, Step 1, there were others, GLADCA, and they would do some of the work that, you know, was ended up at the doorstep of CAB. So over the years, funding was reduced or cut to those other agencies, and we were always told, well, actually, we can go to the CAB, let CAB do it. One of the things that we've done over the years also is that those agencies would use council funding to get match funding, so they would then be able to employ people to do other work. But over the years, the council has made that advice sector so small that we relied on this one supplier. And now what we're saying is that that supplier we're reducing even more. Now, I don't know about you, but one of the things that we see at councillor surgeries is people who come with issues, come with problems, and we often say, actually go see CAB, that's what council told me, that's what they're funded, and that's what they're going to do. Yet here we seem to be saying, well, actually we're going to reduce your money, but we're going to do more. Same with the youth service. You know, one of the biggest gripes I hear is the youth standing around. Now, we used to have a really good youth service that used to not only just target, but used to target those people who you think, well, they were nearly there, but we need to make sure that they stay off the streets. But we may target those that we think are going to cause trouble, but it's also the problem is those who are just beneath them, just behind them. And what are we doing? You know, I say to people that, you know, next year, you know, I was told that austerity had ended, but obviously it hasn't. So I would, you know, ask council to cut nothing from those two services, because those two services save us money in the long run. The youth service will save the police, will save other agencies. And, you know, it's the same with CAB. CAB, where will those people go? You know, they can then redo their model, and they will only see those people they can. But at the moment, they do drop-in surgeries, they do other work as well that targets ordinary, everyday people who come in with a problem. And then what we're going to do is they're going to go with what they can do, and that will mean a reduced service. So please, I ask you, please do not cut those funds.
Thank you, Councillor Jamil. We got Councillor Iqbal next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to talk about the youth workers. Young people having no access to youth workers makes them not being able to talk to a trusted adult about their issues and concerns. Youth workers are positive role models. They provide the confidence to the young people. The young people have such a relationship with the youth workers that they would open up with them about their issues compared to their parents. The youth worker can help young people make positive decisions, positive choices, which would have a huge impact on the society and communities. At the budget scrutiny meeting, we were told that there are alternative organisations, and the cabinet member has also told us that there are alternative organisations and individuals that will be providing the young people with the necessary support. The real question that I have is, how credible are the organisations? How qualified would those individuals be compared to the youth workers, and would they be able to provide the necessary advice and guidance required by the young people? Now, talking about the budget, it has been approximately about 3 weeks since the Budget Scrutiny Committee, and I just wanted reassurance from the administration that since the Budget Scrutiny Committee, nothing had changed regarding to the planning of bridging the final 5 million gap. Again, since the Budget Scrutiny Committee, is the administration still confident that they are able to deliver the savings items in 2020-2021? Again, since the Budget Scrutiny Committee, are there any major risks identified in respect of the saving items? I note that after the Budget Scrutiny Committee, the Chancellor's statement came out. My question is, has the administration got what they wanted or what they were expecting from the Chancellor? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Iqbal. We got Councillor Joseph, please. Next, Councillor Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I first compliment the author of this report for their amazing use of the English language with words such as reviewing, reducing, reshaping, reducing reliance upon, and yet no mention of the word cuts. The fact remains, whatever words you used to call them, they are cuts. Cuts to services which provide invaluable support to those who most need it. Services which assist them to secure work, keep a roof over their heads, and to buy food. On one hand, I'm sure the administration will claim empathy, and yet the £15,000 savings from a reshaping of councillors' parking and phone provisions have been reviewed. What I don't hear is an admission of accountability for the fact that it's years of mismanagement and asset selling that has brought us to this place, and for these reasons, I'm voting in favour of this budget. Thank you.
Councillor Hammerage, next.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to make the suggestion on the possibility of the CAB and Rainbow Savers being offered some space in the Town Hall by PCC Contact Centre at reasonable cost. While sitting here, I've looked into, there are a number of CIBs actually in town halls, one in Brighton and Hove, there's a hub in Manchester, Amley Town Hall in Borough of Bromley, Kensington Town Hall, and the list goes on. Also, have we looked at the possibility of hosting weddings at the town hall to bring an income in? Because there is also a number of town halls that do provide weddings. I support Councillor Sanford's amendment on the CAB. It's a service that we need, not just councillors referring people to the CAB, but a number of employers will refer to the CAP and a number of agencies refer people to them. We need to keep that service.
Thank you. Are there any other speaker, please? Councillor, Councillor Kayoum, next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to draw members' attention to the number of cuts that have been made to the frail, vulnerable, disabled people in the city, and it is quite starkly significant. In the joint scrutiny of the budget 3 weeks ago, I brought up a question about the scrapping of hearing services or making cuts to hearing services, and I've done a further research. Now, we were informed at the time that the evidence was quite poor to substantiate the effectiveness of these screening tests and that they didn't take place in Cambridgeshire. I'd like to draw members' attention to the fact that we have a different demographic to children in Cambridgeshire as well, in Cambridge City. And what comes to mind is the fact that we have children who have multilingual backgrounds here that can lead to an increased percentage of those children developing speech delay. It is an essential component, and through a bit of research that has taken place and that I've done, I'd like to suggest consideration of purchasing of devices in place of that service that can be operated by members of staff, plugged into a computer, and can very effectively detect hearing loss for those children that are deemed to have speech delay, and because of the sheer numbers of children that we have here that are diagnosed with special needs, speech delay, hearing loss, which is significantly different in comparison to children in Cambridge. So that's one suggestion. The other suggestion I'd like to make is regarding the cuts to the lifeline services. Now, it does state within the report that measures such as fall detectors, etc., would be brought in. Although it is a point to consider, my worry is that we have an elderly and frail population that don't necessarily use their lifeline because of falls. We have bed-bound patients. We also have people that can't speak or can't communicate, for example. And may I please ask, is there any data available to suggest how effective these falls detectors are? Because if we can substantiate that and see that they are like for like, then yes, it's a point to be considered. But to scrap the lifeline service, I think, will be detrimental. And in the joint scrutiny of the budget, I was very praiseworthy of the fact that it goes to this chamber and this council's credit that we are leading the country on the turnover of discharge that we have. Councillor Seaton mentioned that we want to keep people safely in their homes. I fear that by scrapping the lifeline services, especially for our vulnerable and elderly population, could cause a detriment to those figures. Therefore, I would like to request them to reconsider keeping this service. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kayoum. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Nawaz, you want to come back?
No, he wants to speak.
Councillor Nawaz, you want to speak?
I would. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I would like to thank the officers for all their hard work. I appreciate firsthand how difficult the task at hand is. I'd also like to congratulate Councillor Sanford and his team for leaving the secret society. And he's more than welcome to join us and work with us. He'll find us to be very open and transparent. And I look forward to working with him and his team. Councillor Seaton says we've avoided cuts. In fact, he mentioned that twice. The second time he said we've been successful in avoiding cuts. And yet, just like as Councillor Joseph has stated earlier, using the words reshaping, restructuring, reducing really means cuts. But for some reason, the Conservatives are afraid to use that word tonight. And as Councillor Murphy said, you have to look at why we're here. And we're here mainly because, as this report states, the Conservative government has failed to fund us properly. That's because, very clearly, they don't really care about local government. They don't care about the challenges faced by people on a daily basis. And I know Councillor Wayne Fitzgerald will stand up and say, we do deeply care, and Councillor Nawaz is driving around in his Rolls Royce and giving us these lectures. But if they did care, they wouldn't have cut our budget so much. And above and beyond that, all these millions of pounds we've wasted, and I've got a long list here, in fact, and I'm not going to run you through it tonight, but it starts from St. Michael's Gate, it goes all the way to Microsoft, Google, Microsoft, all sorts, to giving rent-free to Greggs, £15 million to private companies for building hotels, and plenty more, which I don't need to remind you of. But this is the interesting point. On page 6 of the initial budget proposal, we've got cabinet priorities. The first one is growth, regeneration and economic development. But I can't see much of that in the budget. The second, improving educational attainment and skills for all children and young people. Yet we can see cuts to the youth budget, and we're right at the bottom of the league table for education. And the fourth bullet point, pursuing the environment capital agenda to position Peterborough as a leading city in environmental matters. Yet we see nothing in the budget, nothing significant, which demonstrates that we are committed to doing something about the environment. And Councillor Seaton was praising us for having met the deadline, for having submitted or signed off our accounts on time. Well, if you meet a deadline, Councillor Seaton, then you'd kind of average at best. If you beat the deadline by a week, 2 weeks, a few months, then it's something to be proud of. Just because the other local authorities around us in the region are abysmal, that doesn't mean that if we do a bit better than them, that makes us great. But if that's the way that you want to see things, then that's fine. You also talk about working hard with communities, and yet £7.5 million was promised to the people of Millfield and New England a few years ago. and I'm yet to see that money. I'm yet to see that money. And as every day goes by, it looks harder and harder and harder. When I speak to the leader, he says, oh, it's in the capital programme, it's there, it's somewhere safe, hidden, and it will come out one day. And I look forward to that because, Councillor Holditch, I shall be holding you to account on that. Councillor Walsh says, and I paraphrase, something like, I and my colleagues will be keeping a close eye on things. Well, that gives me no comfort whatsoever, Councillor Walsh, because having seen you and your colleagues perform in the last few years, if you're keeping an eye on things, then we've got major concerns ahead.
I find that comment highly offensive. I think it was personal, unnecessary, highly offensive, and there is no substance or evidence behind it. So I do really think I deserve an apology.
So basically, Councillor Walsh, you've seen what's happened with...
Councillor Nawaz, can you please apologise to Councillor Walsh with you?
Well, if I could, first of all, Mr Mayor, perhaps have the opportunity to explain why I've said that, and then we can understand the background. So, Councillor Walsh said, and I paraphrase, she and her colleagues are keeping a close eye on things, and yet we've seen the costs of St Michael's Gate, we've seen the costs of Rhubarb Bridge, we've seen phones being left in desks and costing us thousands of pounds.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, personal explanation. My cabinet portfolio does not cover St Michael's Gate or a number of other things that are being mentioned now. My apology relates to the remark made about my performance in my portfolio area, and I think I deserve an apology for the remark that was made. Thank you.
Well, let me make it simple. Councillor Walsh, if you think I was attempting to attack you personally, then I'll apologise, because that was not my intention. What I said was, it gives me no comfort when you say that you and your colleagues are keeping a close eye on things, because having seen the performance of you and your colleagues overall, as a cabinet, as an authority, administration, gives me no comfort whatsoever. So if you took it personally, I do apologise, because but by no means was it personal to you, Councillor Walsh. Anyhow, so we'll move on from that, if I may, Mr Mayor. We were told about, in fact, last year, Councillor Ellis and I picked up at the Audit Committee meetings that the use of consultants was very high, and I'm yet to see how we've reduced that, because that's something I think the administration could focus on. They've reviewed some of the contracts.
Point of information, Mr Mayor, on the remark that Councillor Nawaz has just
can you
made.
please take it down, Councillor Nawaz?
Oh, of course.
Thank you. Councillor Nawaz has just said he and Councillor Ellis found out about the expenditure on consultants. Pointed out the expenditure on consultants. Well, I would hope you did, because you're on the Audit Committee, Councillor Nawaz, and many years before you were elected to this council and you got on the Audit Committee, we take a report on a regular basis to audit, setting out the names of the consultants, the amount spent, exactly what they're doing, and you can ask any question about anything that is going on to try and make
Point of order. I don't have the card. They've not been put out. I think people are having problems. What is the point of information?
He's making a statement of accuracy, Councillor Murphy, and it is a statement of accuracy. Yes, he used the wrong word.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. It's always good to have your contribution. So, we regularly have detailed reports to Audit Committee on the expenditure on consultants and exactly what it is for. So to try and make out in this chamber that you have suddenly found something which is secret and not been discussed before is absolutely...
Councillor Seaton, that's enough. Can you please take a seat? Councillor Nawaz, can you carry on, please?
I will, thank you very much. Councillor Seaton, you obviously weren't paying attention. I've at no point said I've found anything. What I've said was Councillor Ellis and I pointed out that the use of consultants should be reduced. and it was agreed that that would be reviewed. What I'm saying is that should be further reviewed so we can significantly reduce the cost of consultants, because I'm sure most members in this chamber, be it Conservative, Green, Lib Dem, Labour, Independent, would agree that we should spend the least amount possible on consultants. We should also, I believe, capitalise on our competitive advantage of all things digital. I know we have a cabinet member for digital transformation, but I'd have liked to see more in the budget around that. And as Councillor Sanford said earlier, there should be a greater focus on the environment and climate change, because if we're really committed to that and we're really serious about that, then everything we do should be focused around that. Coming to Councillor Sanford's 2 amendments. The first one I fully agree with, because as has been mentioned earlier, generally speaking, the types of people who go to the Citizens Advice Bureau, I hope that's not the secret society, Councillor Sanford. Generally speaking, the type of people who go to the Citizens Advice Bureau are people who can't afford to possibly seek legal advice or can't seek advice elsewhere, paid for advice. So our colleagues across the chamber, I'm sure, advise their residents to go and speak to the Citizens Advice Bureau to get support, help, advice on what to do next. So I think cutting that would not be a good idea. And Councillor Sanford, I think, has made a reasonable proposal, which is to defer it until the phase 2. And again, so that perhaps he will come up with some ideas for you, Wayne. Maybe he's got some ideas he wants to put forward. Give him an opportunity. And it's the same for the youth budget. In terms of his second amendment, where councillors pay £44 and we were due to pay £144, I think, and this is my personal opinion, if the cost is £896, as Ed states, or whatever the number is, and we've got our members' allowances, and we're really, really committed to the environment, then I think increase it and don't make it 200, 400, 800. If people out there are paying £800 or £800 plus for the permit, members in this room here should also pay a similar amount. And I applaud Councillor Coles and his colleague, stroke partner for car sharing. I do the same with some of my colleagues. So that would be a good start. And those who perhaps car share should be given some form of a discount. And those who don't car share and want to use their own cars could pay more. And we might see a change in attitude and behaviour overall. And on that note, I will not be supporting this budget. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nawaz. Councillor Fitzgerald, please, next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I rise to speak on the budget and the amendments. I'll try and do them in order in terms of reverse, because I have been making notes. And I wasn't going to talk about Councillor Nawaz's personal circumstances, because I believe members, when the opposition start attacking individual members, they've lost all their political arguments, and it's clear that that is the case.
Point of accuracy, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I made it very clear that I did not attack Councillor Walsh.
I wasn't talking about him, did I?
But you know, you pointed over there and you pointed at me, Wayne. And secondly, I did say if Councillor Walsh assumed, thought, interpreted that I was attacking her personally, and I've apologise. So I don't think we need to be reminded of that.
Thank you, Councillor Nawaz.
I think if he listens back, you'll see I started that sentence with opposition. I didn't actually talk about Councillor Nawaz in that context. However, if the cap fits, so you should wear that perhaps. It's interesting to note that this year we've got no single paper or budget or alternative budget at this stage from the Labour Party, because again, they've been absent. I did bring along a napkin tonight, just in case. We could have done this and maybe you could have fitted all your ideas. Although, I haven't actually heard any ideas from anyone on this side of the room about alternatives to what is in front of us tonight. And I'll come back to the old adage, if you want to put something in or keep something in, you've got to take something out. It's as simple as that. You mentioned all these things like St Michael's Gate, Microsoft, Google, lending £15 million, which we haven't done yet, by the way. But all those things are to make money in terms of, not St Michael's Gate, of course, that's something we much desperately need, but Microsoft and Google, there's been no error there. Councillor Murphy quotes numbers, nilly-willy, about what we lost, what we didn't. It's nonsense. If anybody wants chapter and verse, just ask anybody sensible. The same with St Michael's Gate. We paid market value for St Michael's Gate. We didn't have, still saving us £100,000 on the costs of renting.
Point of personal explanation.
Oh, please.
On the computers, you may not be aware, but last year the Director of Finance agreed to carry out an investigation on what had happened with Serco and other people. Serco wouldn't be involved in it because they could have been implemented in it. I'm still waiting for the conclusions on that. I'm sorry I didn't share that with councillors earlier on, but we were looking at a potential of £10 million.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy, you may say these things, but you
Mr.
say
Mayor,
these...
can I write on a point of information? Something
Just let
that
me
you said.
finish that point first, please, if you will. You say these
Mr.
things
Mayor,
to
I've
stand
just
up, but have
risen
no
on a point of
evidence to
information.
back it up. And I'm looking at Mr Carpenter.
One at a time, members, please. Councillor Fitzgerald, please sit down.
Mr. Mayor, the reason why I rise is when I, along with my colleague, we called in the decision for St Michael's Gate. I clearly remember being told that we were paying above the market rate so we could get the properties. It wasn't what he said, which is the market rate. We were paying above, and we did pay above.
He's wrong and mistaken. Market rate and valuation are two different things. Market rate to us still saved us hundreds of thousands of pounds. Are you seriously suggesting we should not have bought them? Is that what you're saying? Don't answer. It's fine. You can tell me the answer again. Look, when it comes to Labour Party policies and politics, the people of Peterborough made it perfectly clear on December the 12th they don't want you in charge. Okay? And that's been clear for the last number of years in this city. What has got tighter in terms of where we are today is a number of things, not helped by the national picture, but, you know, Councillor Joseph said, why are we here? What brings us here? Well, what brought us here is years of Labour government mismanagement of this country's finances. I'm sorry, you can whinge and say what you like, but that's where we are, and we are still suffering from that today. But don't talk Peterborough down. Do not talk Peterborough down and say that we are a bad place and we're in a bad place. We're struggling in terms of the way we're having to manage our budgets, but we have the highest level of employment. We are the 5th fastest growing city in the country. And our house building record speaks for itself in terms of we punch well above our weight on the national average in terms of building those houses. Councillor Qayyum, I just want to correct you on something. We are not scrapping the Lifeline service. I think you've either misunderstood or misinterpreted that, because you clearly did say we are scrapping it. My understanding is there is a charge for the Lifeline service for those that can afford to pay it. For those that can't afford to pay it, it will remain free. I am not aware of any scheme to scrap Lifeline. May I also correct you about the kind of tech available, or hopefully enlighten you, and I'm happy to talk to you in more detail about that. Lifeline is a scheme, and it doesn't necessarily relate to falls. There are other technologies in use about falls, which is, if you came to scrutiny last night, you'll see that one of the fears in the scrutiny report is about fear in terms of largely related to falls, actually. So the kind of tech we're using is not just about Lifeline, and there are many things in play that we are trying to introduce as quick as we can for as many people as we can. So I just wanted to give you some reassurance that that is not being scrapped, okay?
Point of information, please. Thank you very much, Councillor Fitzgerald. I did read in the report, it wasn't as apparent that Lifeline services would remain free. It did state that for those that currently had it free, it would remain free, in which case it would be then phased out.
No. That is not correct. Lifeline is provided by a third party. What is being changed, and if it's incorrect, and I'm not going to look it up, but I'm just giving you an assurance, is that like many things in the council or in social care in other areas, and I don't like using the words means tested, but if you can afford to pay for it, then you should, because it shouldn't be something that the taxpayer funds if you have adequate funds to pay for it. And there are various charges across everything within the council that applies to. So it's not unfair, it's not unusual. In terms of your concerns about the hearing issue, and again, I'm sure that Liz Robin, and I'd be happy to join in, would give you some more background and details, particularly about any concerns you have. So I'm just taking that. I don't really think it's a budget thing, but in terms of the concerns you raise, if you want to meet with us, just let us know about that. So on the tech thing, anybody at scrutiny would have told you last night that plays a very large part in the way we run social services. Councillor Murphy, quote unquote, "There must be another way," stands up and says, "There must be another way." You don't fail to say how or what. Just like all your colleagues, you fail to say how or what. Nothing. You just say don't do it, but you don't offer an alternative or another suggestion of how we might make it another way. It's easy to say when you don't have to make those decisions, but that's not untypical. It's regrettable, that's another R word for you, regrettable, that we have to make any, and I'll use the word cuts if you want, but they are genuinely, officers try their very best to redesign, reshape services that have the least impact on the most vulnerable. We have to balance our budget. But regrettable as it may, we hope to ease those burdens by working closely with the communities and getting involved at a deeper level. Councillor Walsh's Think Communities issue in terms of that scheme or project is looking for innovative ways that support the community, yet at the same time help us to balance our budget. The public cannot expect the council or government to supply or cater for their every need. Society has to play its own role in supporting itself. Do not look to this council for everything in your life. Because, my friends, if you do, the amount of council tax you'll be paying if the Labour Party ever get in control of the city would rocket in order to support those services. And bear in mind, we are restricted as to the amount of money we can raise locally, but the government is moving towards more localism and devolved decisions, whether it's through the combined authority or indeed at a local level, and we will do all we can to support that. Councillor Sanford talked about refocusing and targeting. That's what you actually said. But again, you failed to actually mention where we should refocus or where we should target. And you come here with one of your amendments, which is the 516,000, yet no mention of it, as I'm led to believe, in the budget working groups. It's all a bit too late, but let me give you, and I've talked it through with the leader, and we mentioned it in our group, what we would say, Councillor Sanford, we will happily put the £516,000 back into the budget before we close the budget finally. So you have got some time with your group and colleagues to come up with a sensible proposal that takes out 516,000 from somewhere else in order that you can put your 516,000 back in. How's
Well,
that?
it's a personal explanation, Mr Mayor. His colleague, Councillor Seaton, seems very familiar with the content of what's in the Liberal Democrat election manifesto. So perhaps, in order to get some ideas, he could talk to Councillor Seaton.
Councillor Stanford, did you say that was a point of personal explanation?
I'm not quite sure what it explains.
It was explaining...
I'm not sure that was.
It was explaining what I had previously said, how he had actually misinterpreted it.
Thank you.
Well, I'm sorry. Oh, go on then, David.
Mr Mayor, point of personal explanation. Yes, I am that person. I am the person who read the Liberal Democrat manifesto. I confess.
By the way, I can honestly say I didn't read the Liberal Democrat manifesto. I was watching paint dry at the time it came out. So, I think I've got another one. Hang on.
So, point of accuracy. I know David Seaton has said that he's read our manifesto, but it does say quite clearly that in our manifesto to examine options for park and ride. It does not say to implement. So just, if you are going to read, at least read it and understand it in the context that it was written. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm now slightly puzzled because I haven't even mentioned park and ride. So I don't know why you were getting up to give me... well, OK, whatever. The fact of the matter is, and again, Nick, we are genuinely saying to you, as we would do to anybody else, it's no point in bringing this tonight. Councillor Walsh said, why the delay? Why are we going to delay this? You're asking, for a delay or a reconsideration of that budget item with no clue how you're going to make the 516,000 up. So when is the final budget? We've got a couple of more meetings. March?
Point of personal explanation, Mr Mayor. I really must get this clear. We've always had a procedure in this council that we have the first phase of the budget and council says, are those savings acceptable? If it's not, we defer those savings and we actually ask our professional finance officers to re-examine the budget and come forward with proposals. I am not an expert on the intricacies of the council budget. We have people who are. So if this proposal is deferred, we then go to the officers and ask them to come up with some alternatives.
Thanks, Councillor Sanford. Councillor Fitzgerald, do you want to come back? Yeah.
I'm puzzled, but I won't bother. I'm just reiterating the offer. So the fact is, we will not be supporting your view to delay this decision. However, what we have said is, if you come up with something else, then of course we'll listen to that as anyone sensible would. But, we don't come up with these proposals just, we just don't come in and one day think about them. They're recommendations from our professional team of officers. And you should go and talk to them.
Point of accuracy, please, Mr Mayor. Just drawing your attention back, Councillor Fitzgerald. First of all, thank you very much for trying to attempt to explain what you meant about the Lifeline services and correcting me. But it does clearly state on page 87 of the budget book that the Lifeline, a budget proposal has been developed which will require people to pay for the Lifeline service after the first 6 weeks. And I did clearly ask and request, do you have any data to demonstrate whether the other provisions that you are going to put in place are effective as the Lifeline services, because they're not necessarily there to prevent people from falling. There are other conditions. There are bed-bound people that use them.
I have an answer.
Is there data to substantiate that these other measures are going to be as effective as the Lifeline? That's what I'd like to know. Thank you.
There is a wealth of data about tech in general, but I think we're mixing two things up here. I think we're mixing up the short-term Lifeline requirement, perhaps for reablement and for people coming out of hospital, as opposed to the people that already have it permanently. So I think I'm right, but I'll get clarification from officers if they're not able to do it tonight. But I think there are two different things. So if you come out of hospital and you are given a period of reablement or step down or care, I think you might get it free. But after that point, if you want to continue, and by the way, I will also caveat this because it would be my understanding, or what I would expect, if you're unable to pay for it, like many of the other services we offer, it would continue free. But if you have the fund, am I getting that, David? That's my understanding, and that would be a fair way to do it. But if you have the funds available to pay for it, then you should. So, and I will make sure that that is the case, because that's my understanding of the system. But I did say to you, because I wasn't looking at it, if that's poorly worded, I hope that explains it. But I think the 6 weeks you're talking about is about a reablement period when people come out of hospital, for example. Okay? But there is a lifeline scheme separate to that anyway, which I believe if officers felt or social workers felt it was beneficial both to the person in receipt of that and indeed to avoid unnecessary costs, we would continue to provide that free, whether it's in a reablement setting or whether it's in a permanent setting, because we do not want people going into hospital. Hope that helps.
Point of accuracy. Thank you very much again, Councillor Fitzgerald. I'm seeing that this is actually a public document. I think it does need to be verified. It is rather confusing. It's not very clear.
But by the way, I would agree with you.
Thank you.
But I think it's just a question of interpretation. And if officers have made a note, Mr. Carpenter is nodding, I think it might be perhaps made clearer in the final budget book. Okay? I've forgotten where I was now because thank God we haven't got any time. So, Nick, back to you. So, find the 516,000, my friend, and make a case for keeping it in with the officer team, and I'm sure everybody will happily support it. But if you can't find the 516,000, we're going ahead with it. Okay? And that's our position tonight. So, turning to your other amendment, I have to say, it's codswallop. It's absolute nonsense. And I don't know where you're coming from with this, but let's go back a little while. The whole point of members' allowances some years ago were rationalised into one payment because the whole team behind democratic services and everybody else, you spend half their time counting up bits of chits for parking charges, petrol, meeting allowances, and anything else you could come up with. So the fact of the matter is they rationalised all that into one allowance. And the only reason why we have a member's permit, if I recall, we're in a position of no overall control, and you and the others insisted that we introduced members' parking. I believe that's true. Now, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but my recollection is it was done at a time when we didn't really or couldn't stop it. You want to say something, Nick? Go on then.
No, a point of accuracy. It's hard to do this in a couple of sentences, but we actually used to have a complex system. We had members could choose between a bus pass, a cycle allowance, a mileage allowance, and a parking permit. The members' allowances panel recommended merging them all, but full council decided to keep the free members' parking permit. So that's what happened. You know, I can produce documentary evidence of it if he wants, but that is what happened.
I think you just said what I already said. We never used to have it. It was a complicated system of allowances and expenses, and it's nonsense. Look, let's get this perfectly clear. Right, I read his note, and I'm going, in a way that treats councillors fairly. Hang on, what's unfair? I don't understand what's unfair. Because if we look at the cost of travel to the council, whether you come on bus, taxi, bike, ferry, river, or you drive your own car, in the case of Shaz Nawaz, was a Rolls-Royce, but now he's had to downsize because it was costing too much, we pay our own costs. The council do not pay my costs for travelling to meetings. So I'm not quite sure what's unfair. Now, if you come on the bus, Nick, you pay for your bus fare out of your allowance, the same as I pay for my petrol, my tax, my insurance, my tyres, and everything else out of my allowance. Now, let's get to the nitty-gritty. councillors can often be here at 12 o'clock at night. I don't consider that a privilege, actually. I don't know who said it was a privilege. I believe that I am serving the people who elected me, and I have no problem or qualms being here at midnight. But try and get a bus after that, right? The fact of the matter is, we are not employees, we don't receive a salary, we don't receive a pension, we don't get sick pay, we don't get perks. This is not a perk to be here. I'm proud to be here because I was elected to do so. But as a point of principle, I wouldn't charge members anything for parking because it's not a privilege or a perk. We come here to serve the community that elected us to do so. Now, as for the climate change and how you wish to reduce your carbon footprint, that's a personal choice. If you want to come in your... I won't say it again. your luxury car, or come on the bus. That is your choice. And, Nick, you only come on the bus because you can't drive. That's the only reason he comes on the bus. Right? Am I right? Do you have a driving licence? Anyway, by the by. So look, the fact is, and I applaud
Mr.
you
Mayor,
for that. Well, again, right.
Just a point of information on the car parks. Let's not dwell on councillors' personal allowances. But I've never seen a council member go and pay to park in a council car park when they've nipped into town to go shopping. I think you will find that if the parking attendants were to double check, those perks are being abused.
Look, again, I reiterate, having a member's permit is not a perk. We pay for that member's permit, but I've already told you, my view is one of principle. It's not an amount of money. And I've told you how it was introduced and when it was introduced. The fact is that members receive an allowance that covers all their expenses, including the cost of travel. I want to be perfectly clear. Taxpayers do not pay for the cost of my travel separately to the allowance that we currently get. And everybody is treated the same, so I don't see what's unfair. How you choose to get here is a matter for you. And I come back to the fact, if you want your personal carbon footprint to be less, take a leaf out of Nick's book and come on the bus. That's marvellous. It's absolutely great. So I can't support it because I just do not see how it's unfair. Councillor Murphy's idea about, enforcement. Well, again, let's go back then to providing chips for every bit of parking. And how much more would that cost to enforce or to administer? It's just a stupid idea. In my view.
Point of personal explanation. It wasn't enforcement, actually. I was talking about honesty. When you or somebody driving your car pops into town, not on council business, and they park in that car park, they should pay for it. But they're not.
Councillor Murphy, I'm not going to disagree with what you say, but what I would say to members across the chamber is practice what you preach, okay? This is not a one-sided issue, and I'm not going to point fingers about anybody. No. Well, I can't at Nick because he's not got a car. He's not got a car. Councillor Murphy's talking. He's talking about car parking and permits, whereas those that don't have a car, so or those that have more than one car. You see now, we won't get into the more than one car because that's nobody does that. So look. I'd also like to say on a positive note, when I was talking about Don't Talk Peterborough Down, one of the good things, our highway service is the best service in the east of England. That's a consistent customer resident satisfaction survey year after year. So it's just I missed that one out earlier. So look, this is nothing to do with the budget, as Councillor Coles was saying. If people want a debate about how members choose to get to...
The point of accuracy, Mr Mayor, I really must challenge him on this. If it's nothing to do with the... If members' parking has nothing to do with the budget, why in the budget proposals that the Cabinet consulted on was there a proposal to change the amount of money members have to pay for parking?
Hang on. What may have been or what might have been, we're talking about what's before us. What you're talking about, Councillor Sanford, is not before us. That was a previous suggestion that wasn't taken forward for all the reasons, or many of the reasons, we have talked about. This has no financial implication, your amendment, in terms of the budget now, because you're even asking, a point that's not been made, about this to go to July. Hang on, we've got to pass the budget in March, so you want a consultation to go to July. Hang on, so what are we going to do about your suggestion in the meantime? So I think Councillor Coles said earlier, look, if you want a debate about members' parking in general, take it to the appropriate forum. This is not a budget issue, because there are no financial implications here on your suggestion.
Point of accuracy.
Because you're saying it's July, which is after the budget.
Point of accuracy. It says quite clearly that this puts another £4,000 back into the budget, so it does have a financial implication.
No, you're missing the point. You're missing the point. Because you're asking for a report in July, not March. If you were saying this had to happen before March, I understand what you're saying. But you can't have a decision on something now taken in July that's in the budget in March. It's bonkers. What are you talking about?
I don't like having to do this, but point of personal explanation. What this amendment is proposing is that until July, the payment that members have to pay remains the same. If after July the members' allowances panel decide it should change, then it would change. It's perfectly simple. I don't know what's confusing.
Well, because it doesn't say that. That's why. It doesn't say that. It talks in the budget about something that isn't going to happen because it's not gone forward. But with all due respect then, Nick, this motion or amendment is poorly worded. Because if it related specifically to an amount of money, I could understand what you're talking about. But I have to say to you honestly, in our group, when I read this and I told everybody, I said I have no idea where you're coming from. So, look, the fact is we won't be supporting it, but there is a genuine, if you want to come back and talk about this and relate it to money if you want to, then that's fine. But then again, you know, the members' allowance panel decide these things, not councillors, for that very reason. I'm sorry if what you're trying to do is just not come across in this motion at all, which is why I can't support the motion on your expenses, because it's not clear what's unfair. And you started your statement by saying it's controversial. And I've not heard one person mention it other than you. What's controversial about it? The only thing that's made it controversial is you bringing it up. Nobody else has spoken about it at all. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I shall sit down.
Thank you, Councillor Gerald. Councillor Haynes, next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to say, and I know I'm opening myself up to a huge amount of criticism here, I will. I find this, as a new councillor, certainly completely, I'll say, bizarre and overwhelming. Now, we've had Councillor Fitzgerald say that he brought a napkin for us to make proposals. Just Labour, okay. Because I was going to say, I would not have the arrogance to come in here and to suddenly start going, after only being elected in May, oh, don't cut that, but cut that instead. And I have passed these comments on to the appropriate Director of Resources, that I feel that a better way of doing this would be for members to be presented with a number of options and to be told, you know, select out of these options those that meet this total.
Point of information, Mr. Mayor. We have something called the Budget Working Group, and that's where members can go from all groups and pass information to and from and talk about any decisions or suggestions that they might have in terms of the budget right the way throughout the year. I've sat on it for some years now. It would be lovely to see certain issues coming from other members to that panel so that what you're asking for can happen, because it already is available. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you very much. I believe that's a group that we've felt has been quite ineffective, and at the end of the day, if it's not effective...
Point of accuracy, Mr Mayor. If you came and you contributed, it might be more accurate and more effective.
Point of accuracy, Mr Mayor. You know, what he's saying is complete nonsense. What Councillor Haynes is asking for is for officers to come with a series of alternative proposals that the group can consider. In all the years I've been on the budget working group, that has never happened. And I keep asking for it to happen, and it has never happened, and that's one of the reasons we don't want to be part of it anymore.
And also, a point of accuracy, it is not open to all members. It is only the council group leader and a designated rep. There was some sort of... the Secret Society decided that they didn't like our two reps and then decided that it had to be the group leader and not just two reps. So it is not open to all members.
Point of accuracy, Mr Mayor. The decision was either the leader of the group or a nominated deputy. Thank you.
Point of accuracy, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Seaton, yeah.
We actually then agreed that Councillor Sanford could go and nominate someone else from the Liberal Democrats as well. We were that flexible.
Yes. Councillor Haynes, you want to come back?
Thank you, but you know, the fact that I'm not a finance expert, and I won't take this personally, Councillor Sanford, I don't think I'd have been his first choice to take along. You know, my level 2 AAT doesn't quite qualify me, I think, for dealing with such a massive issue. So, you know, it's just that I find that this whole petty, well, you know, if you don't like this, what are your suggestions? And I know it's not an analogy that translates completely, but if I explain something to my class and they say it doesn't make sense, I'm supposed to be the expert to find another way. And all I believe, you know, it takes me to my proposal. I know it's very difficult to make lots of suggestions when you're trying to cut so much money, but, you know, it brings me to my proposal to support Councillor Sanford's deferment of the cut in the youth budget to give people time to maybe find alternatives. And I would like to support the amendment to defer this because, as Councillor Walsh said, you know, the changes or the impact is going to be monitored, which is an acceptance that there is going to be an impact on some of the services that the most vulnerable children in our society use. You know, one-to-one support, reduced drop-ins for those not in education, employment and training. You know, I used to go to school and...
Point of explanation, when I talked about monitoring, the fact is that the service is being redesigned to go back to the R words. And I would monitor in any case. I will particularly monitor very closely because there will be a redesign of the service. I did not use the word impact. Possibly there is an impact. We have yet to see. We have done our very best to make sure that should there be an impact, it will be minimal. I am not monitoring the impact. I'm monitoring the service as a whole. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I would expect there is going to be an impact and I would expect any sort of monitoring to be able to detect that impact. So I apologise if I was not clear. Councillor Fitzgerald talks about communities. I mean, the document refers to getting people in our communities who know our children to work with them. But I've spoken to people who are in the third sector who say we want to do our bit, but we can only do so much. We are, you know, running out of time. They're certainly running out of money. They can't keep doing more with less. I mean, in my day, I won't tell you how long ago that was, we used to have youth workers in schools, and I used to wonder why it was always the naughty children that were hanging out in their office, and I understand now why. It's these most vulnerable youths that need the support and the one-to-one support and the drop-ins and the places to go to get advice for the issues that they are having. And it concerns me that the Youth Council asked, why is the youth service always the first to get cut? You know, we've got a generation now about to enter into the big wide world after their GCSEs or post-16 and GCSEs who have been educated in austerity. They've been educated on an ever-decreasing budget, and they are sceptical. They look at the world and they go, well, what is there for me? We get parents, you know, in the consultation, parents were concerned about an increase in child sexual exploitation, potentially family breakdown. This is the perception. The perception is that we don't care about the youth, that they've got nothing to do, and then we get upset and annoyed when they go out and they do things that they shouldn't. The police then have to deal with it. And, you know, the police commented on this, so they are obviously concerned. They think it is worthy of judgment. You know, I think that there's a risk of this being false economy. It just needs to be put back so that we can have longer to look at alternatives, that the experts can look at alternatives, because otherwise it's going to be false economy for us, for the other groups that have to deal with these youths when things happen. So I just would like to support the amendment. Let's not increase the scepticism of our young people and the concerns of our residents, and let's try and just give ourselves and officers the time to find an alternative. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hind. Councillor Jones next. Councillor Jones.
I promise. Hang on. Am I on? Okay. I wasn't going to speak, I promise. But after Councillor Fitzgerald's diatribe going back in history books and his go at Labour, I actually have some sympathy with the administration. And the reason being is that we're in this cleft stick because of 10 years of Tory austerity. Let's not forget that. So what we have to do is this administration is now forced down into a situation whereby who are the people who are going to be the most affected? If you look at Rainbow Savers, those with, quote, chaotic lifestyles, they're not going to get bank accounts anywhere else. The elderly, the sick, yeah, the usual suspects that come from what has happened in the past. We were going to stand up for Peterborough, I recall, a few years ago. I don't really remember too much about it. Margaret Thatcher never lost an election. Who got rid of Margaret Thatcher? Her own party. I wouldn't think you'd get too long odds on when the Conservatives realise that their current Prime Minister, and you ran a good campaign, better than ours. The results speak for themselves. But, you know, what we will do as the Labour Party, and I'm sure everybody on this side of the chamber, we will look and support our residents and our constituents, and we will look at these people that are going to be affected by these cuts. The chances of the amendments going through are minimal, but the reality is that you're asking now about what we're going to do in terms of raising income. Well, if you speak to the directors, I'm meeting with the directors. I don't make a big show about it, but we're going to look at local authorities to say in terms of digital and transformation. In my own time and in my own money, I'm going to Plymouth at the end of the month. I've already been to an LGA event. No, we can't do anything right now. No, we can't. But I'll be watching, my fellow councillors will be watching, and as a Labour group, and I'm sure others will see, the weak and the vulnerable in our wards, they need to be represented, and we should be looking at ways that we can help them in any way that we can. And that's all I would like to say, please, is that we will be watching, and if we find that those same people are affected as they usually are, after 10 years of austerity, not Brexit, austerity, we'll be coming back to you and we'll hold you to account for everything that
Thank you, Councillor Jones.
Believe me.
Councillor Hogg next, please. Councillor Hogg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Jones. You bring up the thorny subject of the Standing Up for Peterborough campaign. There's a flag that I drive past every time I come into council, still there, still flying proud. I have to ask that the tens of thousands of pounds that went into that campaign just before a batch of local elections, I'm not saying that the two are related in any way, how much were we able to get back from central government?
how effective was that campaign? When was the last time we wrote to government ministers under that banner asking them for more money? The reason we are here tonight looking for reductions in our budget
Point of information, Mr Mayor, to respond. Councillor Hogg said, when was the last time we wrote to government asking for more money?
Under that banner, I said.
Under that banner. I believe the answer was yesterday, when we sought their support with capitalising certain costs.
So you used the phrase standing up for Peterborough.
Multi-million pound. I think that's well known now between us and ministers. But you asked the question.
Yeah, I asked the question. When was the last time that you spoke to government ministers under the banner of standing up for Peterborough?
Councillors, one at a time. Only one person should be standing at any one time. Thank you.
You want to sit down?
No, you go on.
Councillor Hogg.
Oh, Councillor Hogg,
you need to finish. If you...
He's finished. He's finished. Okay. How apt is that? Sorry. Councillor Fitzgerald has starts his talk saying no personal attacks, and then has a personal attack against our leader, a leader of this group, it's. I fail, but the words would fail me. He talks about, well, if you're coming up with amendments to the budget proposal, you need to come up with pound for pound. So where are these? The Cabinet have met, and they have looked at the proposals, and they have reduced, they have removed the 15.2 thousand pounds worth of savings for IT equipment. They've reduced, they've removed the £4,000 for current car parking charges. Where is the commensurate amount of money for there? You talk a good game, and yet when it comes to you, you don't play by your own rules, do you? What we are asking for is we're asking for a deferral, not a removal, but a deferral on these items so that we can look at them more closely, because we feel that the cab service is one that is very useful when we have people come to our surgeries with complex financial problems. We are able to signpost them to that very valuable service. We're not financial advisors, and I don't want to be in a position where I'm having to say, well, I can have a look at this for you because we've stopped funding the Citizens Advice Bureau. I think all wards...
Excuse me, Mr Mayor, point of information.
Sorry,
Point of information, it's not that, actually.
Okay.
Councillor Hogg, you need to sit down. Thank you.
What is being said here is totally inaccurate, because there have been many opportunities for these issues to have been raised, discussed, proposals brought forward. Why leave it until the 11th hour tonight, where we are ready to take a decision, and come up suddenly with, oh, we don't like this, let's change it? We have to make a decision tonight. We have to crack on.
Point of order or just a speech?
Anyway, opportunities have been given to raise these points. It isn't for you to come up tonight and say pound for pound. You could have done all that.
Yeah, can you sit?
Can I raise on standing order? Point of order. Point of orders are supposed to be delivered in 30 seconds.
Order. My point of order is that when members on the other side get up and they talk about a point of information and then go and make a long speech, there is nothing in the Constitution about points of information. So I do feel, Mr Mayor, that when they do that, you should be not allowing them to.
Councillor Sandford, what they actually mean to say is statement of accuracy. They're using the wrong words. If it was anything other than the three that are allowed, I would be stopping them.
I come from the north of England. There, we was taught, if you mean something, you should say it. So if they mean something, they should use the proper words.
Councillor Hogg, you want to come back? Councillor Hogg, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So in youth services, we're looking on a background of increased number of antisocial behaviour. Certainly, there's been a blight of motorcycles across many wards in terms of graffiti. The youth have got nothing to do, and we're looking to reduce this service even further. I think it's going to be a false economy. I think it's going to end up with more cost going to the council. And, you know, from my point of view, you know, who here will put their hand up and say, yeah, I'm happy for youth services to be cut in my ward? Who here? Who here wants to see youth services reduced in their ward? And yet that's what we're proposing. That's what you are proposing to do.
Councillor Sresti next, please. Councillor Sresti, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I've probably nearly forgotten what I was going to say after all that time. Hello, can you hear me? The light's not coming on. Right, okay, can you hear me? Right, this is really interesting debate. I was listening to it all and taking it all in, and if you believe that, you'll believe anything. The thing that really I found really amusing was Councillor Murphy saying that on a point of order it should only take 30 seconds. May I please point out to Councillor Murphy that I'd be delighted to buy him a watch so he could control his own time when he stands up to make his own point of order. What I really wanted to say was a little bit of the issues that were brought up by follow some of the issues that were brought up by the leader of the Labour Party. I would like to say to the Liberals, great ideas, join the cross-party group. Let's see if we can find a solution. If we can find a solution and we can find a way of doing it better or differently, what's the problem? No one has ever said to you, we don't want you, we don't want to talk to you, we don't want to listen to what you have to say. Certainly, you do it in other cross-party groups, and most of the time...
Point of personal explanation, Mr. Mayor. I have to say, you know, one of the other reasons that we're not want to be part of the cross-party budget working group is I have time and time again put ideas forward and hope that officers would take them away and investigate them. And a number of them, I'm still waiting to hear what has happened. Yeah, that becomes a very frustrating process.
Thank you. Councillor Sresti, please.
As much as I respect Councillor Sanford, that's just a cop-out, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure that if he comes forward with some right ideas and some solutions, everybody will listen to him very carefully and try and find a solution to go forward. But the first thing that I really enjoyed to hear from the leader of the Labour Party was, we're not doing anything in the environment. Why are we not doing anything with the environment? I think the question was. He also went on to talk about Rhubarb Bridge. And of course, the big thing that nobody ever mentions about Rhubarb Bridge is we've created a passage across Borges Boulevard for disabled people, where before you couldn't get across. And, you know, that's part of the humanity of this city. So when things are taken out of context, like we're not doing anything in the environment, has he already forgot that whenever it was that I answered a question not so long ago, that we're working on a private wire to come from our power station to bring it all the way down Fengate, come all the way round the town hall, go up the way at Borges Boulevard, and it's going to stop, hopefully, in Maskew Avenue. We're also working on what would you call it, a heat pipe to follow the same track, so that we can provide, both for our local authority buildings and for anyone else that wants to sign up until we run out of power or heat, services that will bring income, a lot of income into the city and save our citizens money. That's just one thing that we're doing in the environment sector. We're looking at every single building that we own or have an interest in to bring them up to standard. this council, via the leader, instructed me, to have a cross-party working group to make sure that we deliver zero carbon by 2030, whatever it is. We're working on all of that. You know full well we're working on that because you're a very important and respected member of the group.
Point of accuracy, Mr. Mayor, or personal explanation
I'm going to sit
could well
down.
be. Yeah, I was in the town hall over the Christmas period. In the foyer, there were eight big searchlights were shining all throughout the Christmas period. I'm here sometimes at the weekend. The heating's always on permanently. You know, if he's really looking at all of the council buildings to actually make energy savings, why doesn't he start right here in the town hall?
Councillor Sesti, you want to come back?
And again, Mr. Mayor, I do respect Councillor Sanford, but I do struggle sometimes with him. What difference does it make whether we start in a school, in the town hall, wherever? Wherever we happen to have the resources close by, that's where you start. Doesn't matter, they're all our buildings, and it'll be our savings no matter where we do it. So, you know, why stand up and interrupt me whilst I'm speaking to disparage what we're doing? For what reason? And that's what Councillor Fitzgerald was saying later on. Why take such a negative attitude on everything? This city is doing really, really well. We're struggling with money, and I don't want to go back into the annals of history about austerity and whether it was and whose fault austerity was. We know full well whose fault austerity is. You know, some people had to implement it, but who created the situation in the first place? Because we ended up being where we are. So, you know, that's stupid. That's just hot air, going backwards, thinking about what... We've got to think about tomorrow. We've got to think about our children and how we run our city. And our city, and I completely agree about your ideas about youth work. We shouldn't be cutting services in youth work. But once again, you come forward with a better idea, somewhere else where we can find the money. We have to, by law, put forward a balanced budget. Have to. There is no other choice. So come and help. Come and help. Be part of the group. Work out a different solution. Let's see how we do different things. But it's no good just standing up here and saying we've got to cut it, and you haven't thought about it. You don't care. That's nonsense. We all care. Who put their hand up? Who said when somebody asked a question, which councillor would like youth services cut in their ward? I didn't see anybody put a hand up. Why on earth would anybody want to see that happen? So, you know, we talk about Peterborough not doing this and not doing that. Remember, we've got probably the best high street in the city, and most of the high street belongs to us, the council, and we're earning money from those shops that are open. We've got more shops waiting to move into the city, and we, believe it or not, are ahead of the entire country. When the country was thinking about how to sort out the high street, we, the Conservative administration, had already done it, as a matter of fact. So, you know, let's try and pull together. Let's stop bickering with each other, and let's stop picking on things that you don't understand. I mean, I know it's politics, and we all enjoy a little battle. And yeah, I'm no different to anyone else. If you insult me, I'm going to insult you back. But remember, this city is a great city. It's got real opportunity, and we're all stuck with the cuts that we've had to have and suffer from government, all of us. But you've got to participate. You can't just say, well, I'll put this amendment in, and it's a good idea, and it's an amendment that probably sounds about right. But you've got to give us the ammunition to be able to change things if that's what you want to do. And unless you do come forward with ideas that are going to be better than the ones that, let's say, everybody else has come up with, it's not going to work. Look at the cross-party working group on waste and fly tipping and stuff like that. This year, so far, we've actually reduced the amount of waste that we've collected from fly tipping by 500 tonnes. Not a penny, 500 tonnes. You know, because we talk, we have ideas, and we try and implement them where they work. So I'm sure the same thing would work with the budget working group if you bothered to attend and actually participate. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sesti. We need to move on. Thanks. Can I call upon any other speaker in relation to the recommendation or the two amendment? Thank you. Councillor Wigan, would you like to exercise your right to speak on Councillor Sanford amendments? Councillor Wigan.
Thank you. Sorry, that's more technical problems. So it didn't want me to speak. In fact, a few people might be glad of that, but I am going to speak. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, for inviting me to take my right to speak in seconding the amendments. So the first thing I'd like to say is to thank the officers, particularly Pete Carpenter and the service directors, for taking the time to brief councillors. They've come to our groups. We've had plenty of other briefings at working parties, scrutiny committees, parish liaison and things like that, and how honest and open they've been about their portfolios. Because it can't be easy to have instructions saying, actually, you need to do less or do the same with less money, because you have to make difficult decisions. And we all accept that we have to make difficult decisions. And right from the start, for starting as a councillor, from the meeting, the directors' induction that we had at San Martin House, thank you for giving us that information and that insight into where the council is, because it gives so much more of the picture, rather than someone watching this meeting who just sees the headline figures saying, you know, the Tories are taking so much out of our budget or whatever, breaking it down and explaining why. And so thank you for that. And I'm aware as well that the general election didn't help things. I know we've had conversations about savings that couldn't be implemented because the general election meant Purdah happened. And you can't plan for these things. You can blame the government if you want for calling an election, but that's what happened. And we have to face each challenge as it comes along. Secondly, I want to apologise to everyone who is listening to this debate, because barring a few short speeches about specific issues, the quality of interaction between councillors is quite frankly an embarrassment to our council and to the people that we represent. And these decisions directly affect our residents in Peterborough, and they deserve to hear a much better standard of debate, talking about issues and not attacking people. I mean, I know quite a lot of the people in this room on a personal level outside meetings, and the way some of you speak in here is not how I know you outside, and that's really disappointing. And I want to debate issues, not people's personal circumstances. So I'd quite hope as a council moving forward that we can look at the standard of our debates and make that better, because it won't just benefit the way debates work in this council and the way the meetings are run, but our residents will see us in a better light. Public perception of politicians is terrible anyway, and we're really not helping it here. So second and effective to mate on Councillor Sanford's two amendments. So, see, one of them's looking at the cuts to Citizens Advice Bureau and to youth services, and asking to defer those cuts and to consider them in the next round of savings. So we accept the point that if we want it to go forward as an amendment to the budget, we need something else to be done. We're providing a framework for that by saying, put it back, let's look at it again. OK, so we haven't brought a specific proposal to this meeting. We've got time, we can look at it. You're not unreasonable, we're not unreasonable. Let's look at things. Let's have constructive conversations and get that done, rather than bickering at each other across the council chamber. So, we were given details of how some of these reductions in funding will impact the most vulnerable people in Peterborough. Councillor Jamil detailed how important the Citizens Advice Bureau is to the residents who come to us with concerns. One of the suggestions was, well, if the council won't fund the CAB, your social landlord will provide that service for you. Have you ever dealt with a social landlord? It's just impossible. Last year, I moved in with a partner. It turned out that was a disastrous idea and I've now moved out. However, my political choices are much better than my relationship choices. But trying to get things done through the social landlord was impossible. Unless there was a slight incident with your bank and you missed a payment, and they're on you in a flash. If Crosskeys did not kick me out, thank you, Councillor Murphy, I wasn't even with Crosskeys. But yeah, getting things like the bins emptied when there was contamination. I had a really constructive conversation with Councillor Seresti at the Growth and Environment Scrutiny Committee, where Councillor Seresti said, yeah, he was aware of this issue, gone to the social landlord with a solution. It sounded to me like a perfectly reasonable solution, and it also applied to HMOs and other properties. And then he said, how many of these people have taken up the solution? None. So if we can't get them to make their own properties not be covered in rubbish and fly tipping, how are you going to get advice on money, on relationships? Not for me. Not going there. On not being able to pay your bills, on things like that, when they can't get basic things done. That's where the CAB come in, because the people at the CAB know their stuff. That's why people trust them. That's why we, as a council, have trusted them with our money to get the job done. So why are we taking that away? It doesn't make any sense. I'm also concerned about the youth service. So how is reducing the number of hours of provision for young people not a service cut? It is. What concerns me more is the comments that it's okay to cut these because they're discretionary services, but we're doing the stuff we have to. That doesn't sound to me like a council that cares about its residents, that cares about the people that need our help. I'm not saying you don't care. As I said before, I know quite a few of you outside the meeting. Some of you I work with on a ward level, on a parish level, and you do care. It doesn't sound like you care tonight. So saying that it's okay with doing the stuff we have to, that's like me saying, I pay my bills. That doesn't make me a good person. That means I can function at an adequate level and then go on and get on with the rest of my life and doing the things that make the difference. Funding services for young people. Another thing that got me was you want to tell people about the things that exist, the good things that exist out there, some of the groups that exist, but you're cutting the budget. So how are you paying for that? That doesn't add up. You're saying that faith groups could take up some of the slack from the lack of council provision. They could, and some of the faith groups are fantastic. But not everyone has faith. If you believe that religion is not the right way to do education, why would you go to a religious-based faith group? So you need to make sure that there is sufficient coverage to cover all angles. And if you're cutting the services, you can't do that. Another thing Councillor Jamil mentioned, antisocial behaviour. It's a massive problem everywhere. So you don't have to go very far back in the Hampton Gazette Facebook group to find someone saying, kids are going around kicking my door. Kids are egging my car, egging my houses, stealing Christmas decorations. We had candy cane, light-up candy canes stolen from our front garden. Why? Because there's nothing else to do. When I speak to my neighbours in Hampton Vale, they say there's nothing to do. There's some facilities, there's good playgrounds for the younger children, The nurseries are there and the preschool clubs are there. But what's there for the older children? The ones that are likely to cause the trouble? We've got, so some people can afford to send their children to nice, so I was lucky that for some of my childhood, my dad was a single parent on benefits, so it wasn't a lot I could do, but I had friends and we'd go out in Paston and play football and that kept me out of trouble. I was lucky in a way that I was moved away from that at 14 because those that know Paston knows it has its problems. And some of the things that happen in Paston's the only place I've ever actually physically witnessed knife crime. A neighbour pulled a knife out on someone while we were out door knocking. That happened in Peterborough, and if people aren't given the resources and the support they need, they will go down that path. I was born in Croydon, and moving up to Peterborough at a very early age was the best thing my parents ever did for me, because what do you see for Croydon on the news? Someone got stabbed with a machete. Someone, there was a shooting at an ice rink. Kids. They set their own place on fire during the riots. That's what happens when you don't put the funding in place and go down the wrong path. We don't want Peterborough to be like that. But what will happen if we don't put things in place? So I'm saying, I was lucky that when I was about 14, we moved a bit out of Peterborough to a nicer area, didn't know any of the kids, didn't get into any trouble. I was quite boring as a child. Some of you will not be surprised by that. When my dad remarried, we were lucky that we could afford to do some things. I sang in a choir. My sister was a chorister at Peterborough Cathedral. It got better than Paston. But what for those that are left behind? What are they going to do? What are they going to do? In Hampton, we're quite lucky. We've got the parish council gives money to youth groups, and it's fantastic that we do that. But who runs it? And where does their money come from? It's charities. It's Romsey Mill, working with the CSK Church. Some of the projects are very successful and do very good work, but they can only cover so much. The YMCA wanted to run a youth club in Serpentine Green, and they couldn't because the parish council didn't have the money that they wanted and they couldn't get it from anywhere else. Is the city council going to get that money? No, you've got no money. You're cutting the budget. And that would have served Hampton and Alton, both of which have problems. Parish councils aren't bottomless pits of money. We can't do everything. And the problem is, the top-down view of local government is push the power down without the money. The money's gone into the combined authority, which will be brilliant when we get the autonomous metro in 40 years or something, when it actually happens. But it's not going to give kids something to do. In fact, it's probably going to give the kids something to graffiti. I'm fed up with the number of times I see trains going to London.
Point of accuracy, Mr. Mayor. Just 2 points, really. Fascinating to hear a life story, but we're here to discuss the budget. Could we perhaps hurry things along a bit? And secondly,
not sure that's the point of accuracy, Councillor Coles.
When it comes, I'm coming to the other point, which is about the ability of local parish councils to raise precept. The issue, of course, is that the council has statutory duties it has to fund. The parish council is actually enabled to raise funds to deliver these sort of non-statutory services themselves if they were to put that to the local population. So it's slightly inaccurate to say that we don't give the money. The fact is the parish councils have the power for non-statutory services that we don't. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hogue. Thank you, Councillor Coles. I'm fully aware of the powers of parish councils, having been the chair of my parish council for a year and attended quite a lot of very useful training from the local associations. But the parish council in Hampton does not have a spare £60,000 to set up a youth club. We're not going to increase our precept by 50% to pay for it.
At the same time, the City Council's having to raise its precept to pay for council services and adult social care. The police is raising the precept. The fire is raising the precept. You say the council tax is low here compared to other places, which is a fact, but it's still going up and increasing the pressure on low-income households. Do we want to make that even worse? That's the conundrum. And 500,000 from the City Council can do a lot more than £5 grand, which is the most we can give as a grant at the Parish Council. I've been listening to the debate and making notes. Now you've thrown me off my point, Councillor Coles. Thank you. So, I think I've made the point about youth provision and why it needs to be looked at again. So, I hope you will be reasonable and support the amendment so that we can look at this. You can say no, because I know that's the answer anyway, but look at what we give us extra time to look at it and see, can we do something else?
You've already said you can.
Not £500,000 to £600,000 worth, and that's what you're taking away. And the same for the Citizens Advice Bureau. Parish Council isn't going to replace the Citizens Advice Bureau funding. People have lost their jobs. Councillor Sanford told you that. It's a real impact on humans, and that's not even the people that are going in for help. That's the people serving them. That's not good enough. So, I'll get to the other amendment, and I'll be very quick, because none of you wanted to talk about it. The issue of members' allowances is simple. Either you agree with the principle of having members' remuneration set independently, or you don't. So you do. So support this amendment, because that's putting the perk of councillor parking into an independent committee. What's wrong with that? Although actually, by Councillor Fitzgerald's logic, if we're covering on our own the allowance is covering the cost of travel. So when you buy a car, the cost of travel is petrol, obviously, the car itself, maintenance of the car, and where you park it. So surely, by that logic, we shouldn't have parking permits at all. But we're not saying that. We don't want to necessarily get rid of them. We're saying put it to an independent body, let them see if that's reasonable. That's not what you said we were going to do, which was we're going to get rid of them.
Mr Mayor, personal explanation, please. I didn't say that. What I said is that this is not the forum for this discussion. If you want to bring up parking and costs and charges, whether they're members or anything else, take it to the panel through the normal route. This budget discussion is not for this forum, because it doesn't talk about money. The suggestion of what was in before is not before us tonight. And I'm not repeating myself. It's not appropriate here. That's what I said. I didn't disagree with where it should go, but not here.
So you're agreeing with me, but voting against the amendment. OK, got it. So that's how you want to do it, fine. But you are saying that we're right, but you're voting against what we put forward because it's not what you put forward. OK, got it. Yeah, you did. So, we're not getting rid of parking passes. We're asking an independent body to decide what is going to happen, so we don't have to talk about it again here. OK? That's why you should vote for the amendment. So we don't have to talk about it here again. And I think pretty much everyone would be happy with that.
Members, sorry, Councillor Wigan, I just need to clarify, because I just want to clear up an inaccuracy. The Independent Remuneration Panel looks at the issue of members' alliances, and it will be convening later this year with the aim of reporting back to Council in October. However, it's this Council that sets the alliances, and they can either take on board what the panel recommends or not. Just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. And my point is that we, as councillors, should accept the decision of the panel on all issues, including councillor parking. So I hope that's clear, and I haven't unintentionally misled anyone. So that covers the two amendments. A lot of the other points that I wanted to make at budget in general have already been made. We've had a discussion about Lifeline, which I'm concerned about. Who decides what is an adequate income? Is it the person making the decision, who's paid quite well, or is it the person actually taking on the service? Because there comes a point where that isn't as affordable as some people think it is. So we're really concerned about the impact of that. Streetlight dimming, which is unsurprising no one else has raised, in theory it doesn't sound that bad, but we all know there's areas that are quite dark already. We don't want any incidents where there are safety concerns. I remember when I was working in Watford, there were Hertfordshire County Council did this, and they turned off the lights on streets directly from the station. People come back late at night, pitch black roads. Now, I know we're not going down that route, but the same principle applies. And I've raised concerns in previous meetings about the use of consultants to find savings. I think that's ridiculous. I think, I know we've had arguments, discussions at previous meetings about this and why you think it's a good idea and why I don't. I still think spending millions to make savings could just have gone into savings. That is all I want to say. So thank you everyone for listening. And please support Amendments 1 and 2.
Thank you, Councillor Wigan. We got Councillor Holditch. Would you like to exercise your right to speak?
By the way, the applause wasn't for the speech, it was for you packing up, all right? do you know
I was applauding because I was impressed by what Councillor Wiggins said. He's putting words into my mouth.
Thank you. Councillor Holditch, carry on.
Okay. You know, I genuinely thought that my daughter and my granddaughter have got more bloody sense than being here tonight. They must be that hard up they can't afford to go to the pictures, or unless they thought the entertainment was better here than it is in the showcase. Hello, dears. All right? Good. Thank you. Right. Can I just say, our officers have been spot on the money we're getting from government, because it works out within about 40,000 quid. So that's right. And, you know, somewhere around here, somebody ought to say, well done. Because the youth service is not a statutory service. We could have ditched it altogether. But we understand a lot of what you've said, and we're keeping that part of the youth service, about 1.2 million, I think it is. Because we care, and we want to get those the most in care. And, you know, if Councillor Sanford would actually done a bit of research about his motion, he'd have found that the panel's going to sit in October. He's talking about July, you know, so why would we want to do that when he could have done it in October? Quite easily. Fair funding. We heard a lot of that. I led that campaign, and it was very, I think, very well done. And we got some money out of it. But fair funding campaign finished on the 29th of March last year, and the government were going to address it this year. And because of that thing called Brexit, it ain't going to be done until for 2 years' time. So that's the reason you haven't seen anything on that. We talk about my friend here has just given me an indigestion pill, I think. We have a lot of things said tonight. I mean, St Michael's Gate, when Murphy first got involved in that, he wanted us to keep it, buy it, and keep the people in it. Well, where were the 400 people that we've housed in St Michael's Gates in it? Where would they have gone? Into hotels costing us a lot more money. And currently, whatever we paid for them, it will save us £660,000 a year. And, you know, that it's got a lot of people with their own front door, and we've been able to house them from that. Well, also, a lot of crap about the bridge, Rhubarb Bridge. Junction 18, I think it is, and that's what it ought to be called. You know, I got involved in that because the public wanted the bridge open. I wouldn't have spent my money on it like that, because, yes, it's going to be repaired, but in 10 years' time, it won't be repairable. But, you know, that's what the public wanted. We did it. It's currently a radius of 1 in 12. And to be a disabled facility, it has to be 1 in 20. And the reason the variance of cost is, if you'd have done it 1 in 20 and provided, you'd been in the middle of Marks and Spencer's. And you would have had a hell of a lot of compensation to pay. And all that thing we had, and the leaders had it the people round the other night to tell us what that survey that said somebody might get knocked over or injured or whatever it was based on London traffic. And the things that they said about it have been rectified in the design. And once it's done, then it gets surveyed again, and then they surveyed again after 12 months and so on. If wherever you put cars and people, you're going to have some sort of accident. And the other at-grade crossings we've done haven't been causing a problem at all. And Nick reminded me the other night, in 2008 in the ET, and I haven't got it with me tonight, he suggested at-grade crossings there. So they must have been a good idea then, if they ain't a good idea now.
I knew that
again.
Careful. You should have
What
never
I said was
One at a time.
personal explanation. He's raised what I said previously. What I always said was that we should do proper public consultation to see what the people in that area actually wanted. My problem is that their consultation was absolutely shambolic, and that's why they got the response that they actually received.
Councillor Murphy.
Point of personal explanation. I raised the finance, but I also raised the safety of that at-grade crossing. And I don't think it's... Did you say crap? I don't think it's crap. I think that's an appalling term to use. I think it's really important. Now, tonight, you've made it clear that you knew about that report that was done by the operator that said there would be fatalities. I want to know why we weren't made aware of that as a council, and why you've ploughed on ahead with doing something that we've been told is going to kill people. That's not a mistake. That's negligence. And I think now you may want to stop the work. We've got disabled issues, problems elsewhere.
Can you sit down, Councillor Murphy?
Sorry, I went over the 30 seconds.
Thank you.
It wasn't a point of personal explanation.
As I said, if you mix people with traffic, you will get some collisions over time. But if you look at Van Hague, for instance, and we did that 7 years ago, and there's been no accidents there. There's been one on Borges Boulevard, because we put 3 in there. They are safe, and they enable people to have an option to get across. Also, if you talk to local people, they wanted to keep the bridge in the main, and they were stirred up to want to keep the bridge, I have to say. They will tell you they didn't want to go across it at night, because of the dangers in it and the assaults that have taken place on that bridge. So, they've now got an option to do it. Climate change was mentioned by Councillor Sanford. He raised that in the all-party budget meeting, and the answer's still the same. Most of the stuff that's going to come up into Marco's committee next month, I think it is Marco, isn't it?
For what?
Will be climate change.
Oh, yeah.
Will be capital. And I said it then, and I'll say it now, if what money we want, we will put in within reason, because that's what we want to do, and we support the climate change emergency. But you can't put money in when you don't know what you want. Can I say, Manor? Yeah, I love this one. He brought it to my attention that 7 million quid was still in the budget. It actually isn't. It's £2 million each year. But it's given me attention to have a look at it, because if you left that 7 million quid in there, that would cost you another £1 million to service it, and we'd have to make another £1 million worth of cuts if we left it. At the moment, we don't have to. So, and also, I'm just going to say, I'm pretty disgusted with you lot over there. I am. You're on about some poor guy, or wet lady, whatever it was, losing their job in whatever it was, Citizens Advice Bureau. You, within this budget, are making 150 of our staff, probably even more, redundant. And not one of you has said you're sorry about that. They are our best asset, and I wouldn't like to see any of them go. But there you go, they are. And if you want to put that £600,000 back in there, that's another 12 people you're going to have to make redundant in this town on that basis. My friend here says you can have the keys to my office and you come and do the decisions for the day and see if you make them any different. Because if you've got all the facts that we have got and we transmit them to you through different committees, you'd probably come up with the same conclusion. Street lights have just been mentioned. It hasn't been mentioned. I'm surprised it hasn't. But I'm not surprised in many ways, because many of us went out in the street and we watched them being dimmed down by 20%, and you couldn't tell the difference. My colleague, Councillor Coles, then, and I think Councillor Lane here, took them home and put them on a computer, and at 20%, you couldn't tell the difference on the big one, but if you did to 40%, you could, but just went a little bit yellow, as I understand it. Is that correct? So, you know, that should not make a difference. I think I've said enough. I don't want to go on, because I could go on about my history and my dear friends up in the gallery there that having to put up with listening to me.
How's your relationships?
Yeah. We're doing all right. Thank you very much.
How's Barbara?
Thank you, Councillor Holday. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We got Councillor Seaton. Would you like to sum up, Councillor Seaton?
I'd be delighted, Mr. Mayor, and in keeping with the discussions we've just had. This is Hair by Stefan at Peakai at Serpentine Green. I said I'd give him a shout out tonight. Stefan at Serpentine Green, nice guy, nice guy. And we're also running a book on who jumps up to interrupt me tonight the most. Councillor Murphy, you're one up so far. Councillor Sanford, my money's on Councillor Ours here. This is in no particular order, but I've got to start with the positive, following on from Councillor Wiggin. You know, I have a lot of respect for Councillor Jones. He talks a lot of sense. I can see, because they're due pretty soon, so have another one, a future new Labour leader. Maybe in May, maybe in May.
He's got our vote.
I'm just going to say very quickly, why did we have austerity? Because Labour had forgotten how global financial markets had become. That's why we had austerity. Yes. They forgot that one of the biggest countries in the world for a finance industry had managed to stick its tendrils all over the world. And when the world's financial systems caught a cold, by crikey, we caught one too. Councillor Wiggins' speech. I would support a lot of what you said at the start, Councillor Wiggin. I'd fallen asleep by the end, but at the start I was good. I mean, let's have a love-in. Let's have a love-in, because you are quite right that for the stick I might give you, and other opposition councillors, actually out of this chamber, I don't think I've got many bad relationships with people. We get on pretty well. And I do accept, in this chamber, we do like to kick 7 bells out of each other. Right. Yeah. But you said let's be nice to each other and the public will decide. And as Councillor Fitzgerald said, they did 12th of December 2019. But I do have to put you right on 2 points. And I want to cover one other point, which you said you were chair of the parish council and the council wouldn't fund £60,000 for the YMCA to have a youth club. What you have to remember is that the moment the council said, yes, we'll fund £60,000, you will have 25 other wards across this city all saying, where's my £60,000? And that's £1.5 million. And that's just the way the world works. But there were 2 points that you got wrong. You said CAB is closing down. It's not. It will obviously continue. And it's a point I've not heard tonight. A lot of the cab services these days are going online. So they're guiding people online as to what they can do to help themselves. And you also said at one stage, I'm not sure you meant to, you're getting rid of youth services. And obviously,
Councillor Seaton, Councillor Wiggin standing. Can you take us, please? Councillor Wiggin.
Point of accuracy. I don't think I said CAB is shutting down. I said it was being reduced. So I'm not sure quite that is right. So could you correct that, please?
I'm happy to take your word for that, Councillor Wiggin. Okay. Coming to the 2 amendments from Councillor Sanford. It was quite obvious from what Councillor Sanford said and Councillor Hogg that they've had no discussions with CAB. I mean, Councillor Sanford's knowledge of this is one of his friends, partners, was made redundant by CAB. That was the data we've got around this. They haven't talked to CAB about the impact it will have on them. You know, and I think if the Lib Dems want to delay change but can't be bothered to do something as simple as go and talk to CAB about what that means, this becomes a political stunt, trying to appear to do something, and therefore I can't accept that particular amendment. On the other amendment, as regards some sort of subsidy for buses or whatever, I totally agree with Councillor Coles, who said, crikey, what a long debate over such a small thing. We've covered it and covered it, we've jumped up and down. Adults talking and sorting these things out. You know, there was a slightly disingenuous point that a number of councillors made. I think Councillor Sanford, Councillor Murphy, Councillor Nawaz, where they said, oh, look at the cost of this full-time permit. It's, whatever, 899, 800. I've heard different figures. Well, actually, most councillors here, the only time they will ever use that parking permit is when these car parks are pretty empty and it's 7, 8 o'clock at night. And we're in the town hall, and actually, after 7 o'clock, it's free anyway. So you could argue, for a lot of councillors, it's, you know, it's free money for the council, giving them those permits. Sorry, charging them £44 a year for those permits.
Point of accuracy, Mr Mayor. Could Councillor Seaton tell us at what time of day the Cabinet, of which he's a prominent member, actually holds its meeting? Because he's just been saying that all council meetings are held evenings.
I was talking about generally councillors. We've got 60 councillors. We've got 9 in the Cabinet at the moment.
And we pay more.
And actually, yes, Councillor Cheresti corrects me, we actually pay more for our parking, Councillor Sanford, and that was agreed some time ago. And whilst parking has been taken out, it is something I think we should have increased. Now, Councillor Sanford, on that point, you know, you were talking about ideas being brought forward. Actually, when we did the all-party scrutiny, at the end of that, you came to me and said, I have put things forward. That was the 18th December. And I said, can you drop me an email and just confirm the things that we haven't progressed? And I've not had that email yet. You know, if we get ideas at the Budget Working Group, we will take them forward. You talked at the start, Councillor Sanford, about surveys sent out and what the public tell us. And there was a lovely double negative there. You know, they don't tell us to cut youth services. Well, I suppose I was going to say they don't tell you to resign, but maybe sometimes they do. But I seem to recall that there was a loophole in the Constitution that allowed the Liberal Democrats to get the surveys paid for, and were happily doing that. And we cut that, took that out of the Constitution. There was a point on... Councillor Sanford said it's a real shame that in this budget there's nothing on the climate emergency. There's nothing on the climate emergency other than the climate emergency assessment for every single proposal in the budget. And Councillor Sanford knows full well that in March, Councillor Cheresti and his group will be bringing forward proposals on the climate emergency, and we all see that as important. But Councillor Sanford, what you didn't mention was the financial emergency. And that's what we have tonight, because, you know, even if you take 2 months finding a different way to find £500,000, At the end of that 2 months, there's still more to find. Yeah. This doesn't end until March. Councillor Amjad Iqbal asked a whole series of questions, and to him I say yes, 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 no, no, yes. And Councillor Joseph said we don't like the word cuts. Yes, in some areas we've made reductions. Absolutely. But then, Councillor Joseph, you don't like the words tax avoidance. But that's your job and that of Councillor Nawaz. Because I see the latest advert. I see the latest advert from your firm uses the words guaranteed tax savings. I like that. Guaranteed tax savings. Councillor Dr. KM and Councillor Hemraj both had some interesting points to make about their thoughts and the options we have, and they were really good points. And that's why we'd really like you to be part of the budget working group. Yeah, because those sorts of things can be bashed around at the budget working group. We can ask for more detailed work to be undertaken where we feel it is appropriate. That's why it's important that it is a cross-party budget working group. Councillor Wiggin and Councillor Haynes both made a very similar point. Councillor Wiggin said for the young people there's nothing to do, and Councillor Haynes, what is there for the youth? All I say is a hell of a lot more than there was in the 70s. Yeah, when I was young, by crikey. You know, we have so much on Hampton. We have so much for young people on Hampton to do. It's amazing. Right. Now, I always have to come to Councillor Murphy, which was a very long time ago. A very long time ago. You know, there were so many mistakes in your speech, Councillor Murphy, it would be easier to say what was accurate. It was just bang, 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 mistaken, mistaken, mistaken. But you raised the importance of climate change again. Let's just cast our mind back to a certain wind and solar farm. Green investment, £10 million a year income, making this city carbon neutral, meeting all our energy needs, ahead of its time on the climate change debate. The man in front of me here, Councillor Teresti, took a whole load of grief over that. By heaven, that was ahead of its time. If we could have done that, that would have been huge. And who was the most vociferous opponent of that held it back and held it back? And you mentioned the fits. Yeah, it held it back until it just was not worth doing. Councillor Murphy and his Labour group. Yes, I agree. And Stuart Jackson. You're absolutely right. Yes. Yeah. I've not forgiven him either.
And Mike Green.
And Mike Green. Yep. Now, it brings me to the Labour leader. Two parking spaces for his Rolls Royce. Labour leader. You know, he used to say, there is nothing personal about what I'm about to say, Shaz. Nothing personal at all. But he increasingly reminds me of King Lear. And I'm sure you remember the quote, I will do such things what they are yet. I know not. In December, we had a Labour Party seeking to sell a manifesto of promises, hundreds of billions more borrowed, hundreds of billions more in day-to-day spend. At least those lies made it onto paper. Here we have a Labour leader with nothing to sell. Last May, he had 6 items.
A point of explanation. I never opposed a wind farm. There was never a proposal for a wind farm in those fens in Peterborough. We had a problem because you weren't even going to let things graze in between. You didn't consult the tenants. It wasn't a wind farm we were against. It was losing the county farms.
I suspect there's some backy involved.
Point of explanation, Mr Mayor.
Councillor, yeah, go ahead.
If they didn't oppose a wind farm, I don't know what it was that they were opposing. The idea that no one was consulted is absolute bloody nonsense. Sorry, I shouldn't use that word in council. But, I just wish the councillor would actually stand up and say things as they were.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Sesti.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Last May they had 6 items on a sheet of A4. And so tonight, Councillor Nawaz criticises and complains, but often offers nothing. Even the Lib Dems had 2 points, 2 amendments to put forward. I will do such things, what they are, yet I know not. The Labour leader was questioned by Kev Lawrence on the BBC. So what would you do? Kev asked him. What would you do? And he eventually said, I would do the same, but would have done it sooner and faster. I will do such things, what they are yet, I know not. Well, it's the right...
Point of accuracy, I did not say that, and Councillor Seaton obviously has a bad memory, but if you have a recording, please feel free, Councillor Seaton, to bring that forward. But I did not say I would do the same, so please do not make up things which are untrue.
Councillor Seaton.
I look forward to Councillor Waz. Perhaps you've had 2 and a bit years to think about it. Perhaps in the 7 days you could send a letter to the Peterborough Telegraph and set out what you would do instead. As Councillor Nawaz stood up there, it did remind me, it is the right time of the year for a snowman to pop up, isn't it? A physical entity for a short time, but actually no real substance. But in summing up, I'd remind members of the points I made earlier. We can take pride in successfully avoiding the cuts that many other councils have made. And in many cases, we have improved services. I remember how poor our planning services were before Councillor Hiller took over. We forget how far we have come in the last 10, 11 years. We can take pride in the willingness of our voluntary sector partners to work with us. They've understood our challenges and have stepped up to help us in true collaboration. That only happens when trust and respect exists. And I heard a lot about we shouldn't ask this of the third sector. It's actually what the third sector want to do. They want to take on more responsibility. They bid for things with the council because they think there'll be some money left over so they can do other things. And we can take pride in our staff, without whom we could not run the excellent services we do, and who have contributed their ideas and expertise to bring forward the proposals you're considering tonight. And Councillor Holditch made a really important point earlier. We jump up and down about the smallest things, but what we're doing here is potentially making a large number of staff redundant. I regret that every time it happens. I know the Chief Executive does as well, and the Leader of the Council. But finally, I'd remind you that we have a duty as councillors to pass a balanced budget. Let's be clear, the earlier we get on with the changes planned, the better. Waiting until March will just make our task much more difficult. So think very carefully. If you want to oppose a budget, you will have a bigger problem further down the line. So I ask that you support this item. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Seaton. Members, we will now move to the votes. I hand over to the Constitution.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, we're now moving to the vote on Councillor Sandford's Amendment 2 for item 7, the medium-term financial strategy. So this is in relation to councillors' travel costs and the independent remuneration panel. To vote in favour of the amendment, you will need to press the green plus button. To vote against, it will be the red minus button. And to abstain, it will be the yellow 0 button. I think we're starting the vote now.
Point of information.
I'll press it.
I will be abstaining here. The reason why is my wife is on the Lifeline project, so therefore I have a self-interest. Thank you. Not because I'm against the amendment.
You want to reset?
Sorry, councillors, we'll just reset the vote now. Thank you. Okay, so we're just going to start the vote again now. Thank you.
What's raise your hand? What's happening? I don't know what's happening.
Got any issues, please raise your hand and keep your hand in the air until we get to you, please.
The mic wasn't on.
Some of them not working.
We all.
Yeah, we can go now.
Just wait. Whoever says go. I think you've got something wrong with yours too. Get somebody to come and look at it. Hold on.
There we go. So shall I vote now?
That's okay, yeah? That's okay.
Well, no, mine is.
Whoever says go. Push anything, yeah?
Wait, Pepper.
Or can you vote no, Dan? You can vote no, so you're voting again.
Yeah?
Yes. Pippa, can you just ask, has everyone all voted?
Councillors, we have 2 members that have not voted, so if you could let me know if you're having any issues. If you raise your hand if you're still having any issues, and we'll close the vote in a few minutes. Okay. Okay, so everyone has voted, so we'll close the vote now. Okay, so that's 10 people voting in favour, 47 voting against and 0 abstaining, so the amendment is not carried. Okay, councillors, so we will now vote on Councillor Sanford's amendment number 1 to the MTFS. So this is in relation to the Peterborough Community Assistance Scheme and discretionary youth services. Again, so it will be green plus if you want to vote in favour, red minus if you want to vote against, and the yellow 0 button if you want to abstain. Yep, so the vote is now open.
The first amendment. This is like this. Yeah. Youth services. No, we take them in reverse order. So this is the first amendment. That doesn't help that we haven't got the voting scheme before we go on this one. Has everybody voted?
Yeah. Oh.
Okay, members, so the results are 27 voting in favour of the amendment, 30 voting against the amendment and 0 abstaining, so the amendment is not carried.
Substantive motion.
Right, Councillor, so we are now moving to the final vote on the MTFS, and that is the recommendation as originally moved by Councillor Seaton. It will be green in favour, red against, and yellow to abstain. So the vote is now open.
Just wait, it's not, wasn't open.
Oh.
So green. Somebody go and look at Councillor Nadeem's. Just hold on the machine and look at them.
Now says it. We don't well.
I don't know, we're just waiting to see.
Okay, members, we have 2 members that have still yet to vote, so we'll leave the vote open for a few more seconds.
Do we know who it is, Pippa? Everyone's voted.
Okay, members, so the results are in. It is 30 voting in favour of the recommendation, 26 voting against and 1 abstention. So the recommendations are carried.
Moving on. This one.
Yeah. Thank you.
Quickly.
Thank you, members. Thank you, members. We are moving on.
Mr Mayor, if I could
Councillor Holdridge. Yeah.
If I could just say, I think Pippa did a really good job on that. It was really clear, and I think I'd like to thank her for that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Leader. Agenda item 8A, a report to council review of polling district places station. Are we all agreed?
Mr. Murphy?
Councillor Murphy.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, I know that this was supposed to be a budget meeting, but some businesses have come on, and I'm just asking where this goes. I'm sorry if we didn't respond particularly timely to the consultation, but in Ravensthorpe we could really do with a polling station at St Jude's.
Councillor Murphy, is this a point of order that you're raising?
No, I'm talking to the item.
No, we haven't opened the item yet.
Oh, sorry.
The members were going to say agreed, but are you saying that you want to speak to it? Right, we do need a proposer and seconder then. So we'll just go down the list then.
Mr Mayor, to speak on this, could I please do so? Thank you.
Just here, this one.
Yeah?
Yes, this.
Councillor Allen, would you like to move the recommendation? Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I move it, but with reservations, if I may. I know Councillor Murphy has a point of view, and I would also have a point of view on this. I'd like to say that we firmly support the Way Family Church proposal, and indeed the Peakirk Village Hall proposal. We do have reservations with regard to the mobile unit at the Elm Tree Tavern. I think that it's rightly described in the paperwork that the cost of hiring a mobile unit is much more expensive than using the fixed building, and we would ask Electoral Services to again review this. I understand it's a dynamic process, so therefore it's not fixed, and I have spoken to Electoral Services and they can look at it again, and I would say that the Elm Tree Tavern as a fixed building is a better bet than a mobile unit. I am conscious that mobile units are a problem, and I think the Electoral Services have a lot on their plate other than worrying about the comfort of tellers. But the process of political discourse and elections that tellers are in place, and I think that those that were telling about outdoor unit in December have just recovered from influenza. So can we please review the proposals with particular regard to the Elmfield Tavern? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think you need a seconder, Mr Mayor. I'm happy to second.
Thank you. Yeah.
Councillor Holditch is supposed to be seconding.
Councillor Holditch, are you? Will you second it?
I wish to second that. I mean, I also second his comments on it. But, you know, I understand all parties were consulted. They had the opportunity to do it. You're a bit late now for the local election, but it is a rolling thing. I dare say you could pick a couple of things up. But, you know, come on, let's get it done and let's get home. As Mr Forrest was saying, let's get it done.
Yeah.
Is that it? That's it. No, we've got speakers. So, we've got Councillor Murphy. That's what I know, I've got you.
Councillor Murphy, yeah.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Now, I know we've got till the 31st deadline, so I can put things in writing. I'm not sure we're really supposed to provide things for tellers. We're supposed to provide things for people to vote in, but I do take the point that permanent may be more acceptable. I'd like to put a plug for St Jude's as somewhere near there, because Netherton and Axiom have to go some way to vote. They have to go right on to Westwood. And I think the other one that's cropped up that I'm aware of, there's others that may have some, is Hampton Hempstead, the other side of the area. I think the whole of Hampton probably needs another quick look at before the 31st as well. Thank you.
Councillor Shaznawaz.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just picking up on Councillor Allen's point, so I agree perhaps a mobile unit may not be the best and suitable vehicle to use for local elections, but Councillor Joseph, Councillor Yassin and I have had numerous complaints from residents that they do not want to go into a pub to vote. So if that can be looked at and we can move that location to perhaps Parker or elsewhere, then I would be in support of what you've said, Councillor Allen, in terms of not using that mobile unit.
Thank you, Councillor Noor. Can I call any other speakers? Great.
No,
sorry, I do apologise. Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, what it is, I will be supporting that the Way Family Church, the Green Warrington, to be assigned as the dedicated polling station for the Gun 1 polling district. The reason being is obviously we've got a lot of elderly residents in that area. They've requested this, and we just feel that they'll have a shorter distance to go. People in wheelchairs will be able to access this, and also because it's quite central to Warrington. So therefore I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Have you agreed now? That's it. Have you agreed, yeah? That's it.
Just to clarify then, that the recommendations are as on the paper, apart from number 3, which is that to be added to the end of number 3, so it should be in the fixed building rather than a mobile, if at all possible. Is that right? So that's what you're voting on. Do you want to say is it agreed then? Is everybody agreed?
Everybody agree on this, yeah? Thank you. Thank you very much, and that is the end of this tonight meeting. And thank you very much. Thank you.